The appointments so far. How far? The appointments have brought some disappointments. But why? We want to know what you think. What do our guests also think? And Ghana has designated an envoy to the junta-led Sahelian states. Will this be rocking the boat in the ECOWAS region? Because ECOWAS is not happy about what is going on. Is there a special mission that Vigilante has that we do not know about? Joyce Mokhtari Bauer was tipped to be the Foreign Affairs Minister. What happened? But is her new position a demotion of sorts? Why at all are many people so concerned about who gets where in the governance or the cabinet of President John Mahama? In the meantime, he's come under flack for making some appointments without consultation with the Council of State, which does not exist at this time, and flying on his brother's private jets. In Obuasi, in the night on Saturday, was it? Some 300, 60 people, according to the military, went to some abandoned mines. They say all they were seeking is daily bread because they are starving, they are hungry. Their town, their community has been heavily mined, but they remain poor and subject to all sorts of illnesses and diseases because of the mining. So they just marched there to get some gold for themselves. They allege that when the military came upon them after they broke the fence, they knelt down and pleaded. But the military began to fire at them. And as they ran, they fire at them to kill the several who have been killed. Is that true? How do we contrast that with the military's account that it was these quote-unquote galamseyers, very bold and daring group of galamseyers, that shot at the military, and the military had to defend themselves. They saw the military and they shot at them, armed military. Some people say, wow. There have been other issues about galamsey in town and licenses issued by President Akufo-Addo in the last days of his presidency. The Constitution Review Committee has been set up by President John Mahama to look at the 2010 Atamil's review process and the 2024 Osei Mensah Bonsu-led process, and to make recommendations for changing parts of the Constitution. Do we need a review or a new Constitution completely? That is the case. Another group, the Democracy Hub, has been making at the British Council this week. I'm Samson, Lardy, Anyenini. We'll be right back to deal with the vexed matters.
Hold the sovereignty and integrity of Ghana.
The 6 ministers sworn in by President John Mahama were the Finance Minister, Minister for Energy and Green Transition, Attorney General and Minister for Justice, Minister for Education Haruna Idrisu, Minister for Food and Agriculture, and Minister for Roads and Highways Kwame Agboja. They were presented with the instrument of office after taking the oath of office. In his speech, John Mahama said the government has averted the looming threat of a power crisis.
Through determined efforts, I can report that we have now averted the looming threat of power outages. and began delivering fuel to the thermal plants in the east in advance of the shutdown of the West African gas pipeline. And Honorable Jinapo, I want to congratulate you for working very hard.
The President further noted that similar timely interventions have ensured that short-term measures are in place guaranteeing an adequate food supply for senior high schools.
Similar timely interventions have been necessary in areas such as education, where an acute food shortage was a major problem when schools were ordered to reopen on 3rd January. We have put in short-term measures to ensure that our children have adequate food so that they can go ahead with their learning. These are short-term measures and will help to keep our children in school, even as we strategize on streamlining the supply of food to schools and pay off arrears that are owed to schools, some dating from as far back as 2021.
President John Mahama urged the new ministers to serve with humility, emphasizing that the government will not tolerate arrogance or disrespect towards the electorate.
I therefore charge you to serve in humility and candor, always remembering that we serve at the pleasure of the Ghanaian people and that the authority we exercise emanates from them. We must exhibit tolerance for their views and work to meet their aspirations. This government will not tolerate arrogance or disrespect for the people who elected us into office.
He touched on the issue of asset declaration, stating that timelines will be introduced for compliance.
We must be transparent and fair in all our dealings. The anti-corruption institutions will be empowered to investigate and deal with any appointee who falls foul of the law. I expect all of you to begin the process of declaring your assets. The Chief of Staff will announce the cutoff date by which time all eligible appointees should have deposited their assets declaration forms with the Auditor General.
The Finance Minister, Kasiel Atuforsen, also spoke on behalf of the new ministers, pledging to work hard to make John Mahama the best president of the Fourth Republic.
Mr. President, we have been with you throughout your days in opposition. We have witnessed the misgovernance and misrule of the previous administration. We've learned, indeed, that Ghanaians will not tolerate such misgovernance any longer. We've taken a cue from what you've just told us. We want to assure you that we will serve and serve in such a way to make you the best president in the Fourth Republic.
People should be free to express their views. President Mahama is committed to same, and that's why you find that even people who have criticized him severely in the past have been appointed to play some role in this government. Indeed, I read Professor Kwesi Prempeh's post yesterday in recognition of his appointment to chair the Constitution Review Committee. And he made a point that he was quite a critic. I must say that he's a mild critic, but he was a critic nonetheless. There are others in there, Dr. Esi Ansah, who, by the way, is the daughter of PAV Ansah.
Yes, true.
Perhaps the fiercest critic of the PNDC NDC. I don't know anybody who was more critical of PNDC NDC than him. Dr. Esi Ansah was part of Occupy Ghana. She was fiercely critical. Indeed, she was the one, if I'm not mistaken, who held aloft that placard that said that the king was naked during the Occupy Ghana protest. Subsequently, she took part in some public fora symposia, aired her views. I can bet you that President Akufo-Addo will never give a position of any form to somebody like that in his government. But President Mahama did not have a difficulty. In fact, all the people
that's also a way of winning people over.
No, it's not necessarily a way of winning. It simply means that we are going for
it's another way.
No, we are going for the best and brightest. We do not anticipate that Professor Kwesi Prempeh will suddenly become a sympathizer of the NDC simply because of this. He has gravitas. He's seen it all in life. He doesn't need this to be lured to follow the. I don't think that Dr. Esi Ansah will be tempted to join the NDC because of this.
But Felix,
the point, the fundamental point, is that under this administration, unless very clear red lines are crossed, nobody is going to suffer retribution for airing their views, whether pleasant or unpleasant.
Felix Ofosu Kwache there, joining me this morning for this edition of the show. Bashiratu Kamal is Fellow Center for Social Justice. Inus Husseini is former MP, Tamale Central, and he's a former minister of different portfolios. Frank Davis is chairman, Constitutional Legal Committee of the New Patriotic Party. Oliver Bakavomo is Constitutional Rights and Policy Strategy Advisor of the Democracy Hub. And Suleiman Abrahima is Executive Director of the Media Foundation for West Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, and thank you very much for joining us on Newsfile this morning. Right, so we have seen how the president has gone about his appointment so far, not only in terms of the ministers, but also in the office of the president. We had a list that's named some 10 people: Joyce Bar Mokhtari, presidential advisor and special aide to the president; Stanislav Dogbe, deputy chief of staff operations; Nanaoye Bampo Ado, deputy chief of staff administration. We have Seth Emmanuel Tepe, former finance minister, as presidential advisor on the economy; Professor Francis Dodu, the sportsman, as presidential advisor, National Anti-Corruption Program; Larry Bevrolate. There were speculations that he may go into the Ministry of National Security, or he may be responsible for Interior or something in that regard. He's special envoy to the Alliance of Sahelian States, and that's a big one we are looking at. We isolate to look at also Joyce Bauer. We'll look at that one as well. Then Nanaya Jantwa, who is presidential staffer from the CPP. Beatrice Anan Fio is presidential staffer. Shamima Muslim, deputy presidential spokesperson. And Professor Kweku Dansobuafo is cabinet secretary. So let's begin with you, Inus Husseini. This is your party sitting on the sidelines and watching. Am I right when I say sitting on the sidelines and watching? Are you impressed?
Well, I think that it's proper for me to say good morning to your good self, to my brother, friend, and comrade, Oliver Bakavomo. Good.
Was it your birthday yesterday?
Yesterday, yes.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Many years and looking young,
growing younger.
Yeah.
So what you have to do is to take good care of yourself, not
right.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
And so, and to all the other panelists who will be on this program, I think I can say that so far, so very good. It appears to me that John Dramani Mahama, the President of the Republic of Ghana, is so determined, is bold, and decisive. He knows he has 4 years, so he's choosing his ministers carefully, working within the constraints of the Constitution, dealing with huge numbers in Parliament, trying to recruit the best from Parliament who align to the values, or to his values, and his desire to leave a lasting legacy for this country. So when you have a president who is constrained by the number of years that he can be in office, the number of times that he can present himself for president,
and the number of ministers he has imposed on himself.
The number of ministers he has imposed, that limitation. There is an invidious responsibility placed on him not to joke with his appointments. And in trying to fulfill his mandate, against the background of the fact that the people of Ghana repose tremendous confidence in him to reset this country, he has to choose carefully. And in choosing carefully, people will be disappointed. I mean, you know that in this country, many politicians have a filthy sense of entitlement. And so some have been waiting, thinking that the president will get them into offices. Some have been greatly disappointed because of their contribution to the success of the president. But you are looking at the president who is acutely aware that he cannot fail the people of this country, that he cannot sink below the depths that the MPP sank, that in electing to reset the country, he was communicating to the people that he will do better and put the country on a sound pedestal. So recruitment to carry out this mandate, recruitment for this vision will be tough, will be disappointing to some people, and will have to depart from his earlier ways of doing things. And that you can see that clearly. Yes, and again, you have 187 members of parliament on the majority side of government. So it is unlike any other parliament we've had in this Fourth Republic. Article 78.1 says a majority of his ministers must come from parliament. Now, a majority of ministers is majority. But here you have 187 to deal with. When you had 160, 157, you could manage. When you have 187.
Is 187 the caucus?
The caucus.
Or including those who have decided to sit with the NDC?
Those who have decided to sit with NDC now are counted as part, and you know how parliament is structured.
Right.
Are counted as part of the majority caucus. And in the past, some of them have been given ministerial positions. So you have to deal with all of them. The recruitment process is not an easy task. And that's why you see people being moved. That's why you see that in discussions, the public have suggested that some people be put in certain positions.
He's done 42 so far, 18 more to go. After marking the minority leader and ranking on the confirmation committee, says the president should just apologize to Ghanaians that he didn't really mean it when he says 60, and he needs more than 60 to govern the country, and bring as many numbers as he wants, and they will approve them.
No, we are not going to accept that. As a member of the NDC, the president cannot violate his own promise to the people. We will resist that. And I'm disappointed in Afenyo Markin. When President Mahama said, as a flag bearer of the NDC, that he was going to work with 60 ministers, Lardy, Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia reduced the 60 to 50. It's Afenyo Markin's suggestion that Bawumia was not being honest with Ghanaians when he said he would work with 50. And that if Bawumia had won, he would have apologized to Ghanaians and raised the number beyond 50. You see, we are running a constitution and a government that clearly must win the trust and confidence of the people. We have great trepidation on the way politicians and the political class toy with the lives of the people of this country. We believe that this country can develop with very decisive, bold-minded leaders. That things that we have been doing with careless abandon, it will take time to do them right. We can get them right. And so when John Mahama suggested to the people that he was going to run 60 ministers, Ghanaians saw something new in that. Yes, I've heard people say that 60 ministers in financial terms, the quantum of savings is not that huge. But when you escalate that to include what it will mean to the Ghanaians in terms of the desire of the president to cut out waste, when you escalate that to our foreign partners, to see how recklessness and impunity is being controlled and checked by this, when you escalate that to deal with the issue of nepotism, you are working with 60. And so in the 60, how are you going to deal with your family members?
The chairman's a committee that you actively participated in, not as a member, had proposed 25.
25.
And then subsequently, after the validation conference, where you, Kujetu and the rest of them were, Sectoral was there as well, it was increased to 55.
Yes. Yes, because...
So we can even do with less.
We can do with less. 50. And I agree with you. We can do with less. And there are examples about, everywhere, in democracies, good examples that they're doing with less. You see, Obama came here and signaled to us how we could do with less ministers. He told us to build strong institutions. If you have strong institutions, accountability, transparency, delivery of prosperity will be guaranteed. To the extent that, talking about the capitalist system, to the extent that you build strong social institutions with a sense of justice to mitigate the excesses of capitalism.
Okay, let me go around and return to you on maybe single out appointment of Vigilante as envoy to the Sahelian states, military juntas who are overseeing these countries, even though some of them are receiving the loudest applause across the world. The ECOWAS is not happy about them and their breakaway from the regional bloc. So what are we doing? What are we getting into as Ghana, designating an envoy to these places? Or maybe that is actually strategic to try to woo them back into the democratic fold, so to speak. Suleimana, thanks for joining us. Hello, Sule. Okay. If Sule cannot hear me, it's Bashirat. Hello, Bash. Please unmute your mic. Okay.
Samson, sorry. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for joining us. From where you sit, what's your assessment of the appointment so far? Some of them are actually attracting indignation of NDC, foot soldiers. They say the NCA, Mr. Fianco, cannot be there. Reverend Fianco cannot be there. He's MPP true and true. The Ghana Revenue Authority, they say the man appointed there should be removed. Actually, they masked up. They were trying to mask up there, and there were numbers there as well, trying to sort of, I don't know, if physically stop him from occupying that office.
Yes, thank you so much, Samson. Good morning. I hope you can hear me.
Clearly.
Okay, thank you. So I think first, let me comment on the appointment and in terms of inclusivity, which is also very critical before I come to the question you asked. So far, in some parts, our president has done very well with in terms of the appointment. And as he had always mentioned on his campaign tour and after he won, his interest is not just about political affiliations, but also about getting Ghanaians and citizens who will be able to deliver on the mandate. And also in terms of the political party manifesto that the NDC had used and promised Ghanaians. And I think for a country where we've always spoken about the winner takes all and why it takes away from us enjoying the expertise of other Ghanaians. The president has done well, and as much as some of the party rank are going to not be too happy about the caliber of some people who have been appointed, I think it is fair to say that the president will know what he's doing, and these decisions that he's been taking is not a singular decision coming from him as a person. Then also, in terms of the appointment that have been made so far, whilst in some parts our president has done so well, in terms of the numbers, in terms of balancing women and men and all of that, in other parts, when you look at it as a whole, it has not been really encouraging. So whilst we have passed the affirmative action bill, the bill does not say that we measure on a whole, but it does say that it is measured at different level of all appointments. So if it is districts, at the district level, we measure that. And if it is at the ministerial level, we measure that. But as we speak, the appointment of ministers out of 42, we can say that we only have 7 with it, which is woefully inadequate, 16.7. But if you look at other areas, the president has done well with balancing the equation. Then I also saw a press statement from our colleagues, persons living with some form of disability, where they were also expressing their disappointment that so far there has not been any representation from the community. But as much as possible, it is important that whilst we are craving to build an inclusive government, we look at all people and the minority groups that we have in our society. So to me, I think on the whole, it's been good, but disappointing. And I'm very sure that we should be bracing ourselves more for disappointment in the coming days because the appointments are not done. Then in terms of the outcry on social media, I mean, for the past days, it's been dramatic on social media, where people have even resorted to saying that people never knew that their own godfathers and godmothers also had godmothers and godfathers. So they are all getting disappointed in terms of how the appointments have been. But our interest as Ghanaians should be, will people be able to deliver, or is it going to be business as usual for us? So if our major interest is to revamp our economy from the crisis that we all find ourselves in, and not just the economy, relationship, external relationship, our foreign policy, and all other things, I think for now it's too early for us to start complaining because we've not even crossed the 120-day mark. And there are always opportunities for reshuffling and all of that. So we should take our time and watch as things unfold gradually in our faces. Thank you.
Thank you, Bashiratu. And Mr. Frank Davis, watching from where you sit, is it impressive? Of course, questions are being raised about some appointments being done without resort to the Council of State, which is yet to be established. I don't think this will be new, though. What do you say?
Anyway, thank you very much, and a very pleasant morning to all your viewers and cherished listeners. Inusa, you refused to say good morning to me, but I will say good morning.
Oh, Frank, sorry.
You deliberately my name and said good morning to Oliver. Oliver, morning.
Good morning, Frank. I hope you're doing
well. My troublesome lawyer. Yeah, something good morning to. Anyway, I must say from the outset that I am enamored by the fact that His Excellency the President, John Mahama, intends to stick to his select number of ministers of 60. I only will wish that he is able to stick to that number. After all, our presidential flag bearer and candidate, as at then, Alhaji Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia, intended to govern this country with 50 ministers. So if President Mahama is sticking to his list of 60, we all have to commend him. And at least he's done what is right by the people and is keeping to his campaign and manifesto promise. For that, I doff my hat. But the ministers, of course, I am not in a position to choose or select ministers for the president. But the names that have come out so far, well, we've known some of them in their public and private lives. And sitting here, I cannot for any moment, without any fear of equivocation or contradiction, I don't see how my learned and good friend Dominic Akuntigira, is that the name?
Akurtinga.
Ayene will not be an efficient and good Attorney General. I cannot, for any moment in my life, say that he would not be a good Attorney General, but it all depends on how he carries out the portfolio of office. I have known him as a legal practitioner through and through, and I know the principles he stands for, and I know what he's capable of doing in that ministry. So I can wish him all the best of luck. And hope that he just sticks into the tenants' ethics and principles that we have all espoused as lawyers over the years. So I wish him well.
There are those who are suggesting that we should look at something else, that whilst the president may be sticking to his 60 limit, the persons appointed to the presidency, a good number of them are ministerial level appointments. Their pecs will be the same like ministers, apart from the deputy chiefs of staff and the chief of staff and deputy chiefs of staff, as well as the secretary to the cabinet. The rest of the 10 or 11 or so could also be considered as the president, whilst keeping to the 60, is using the back door to satisfy a certain number.
Samson, I will not sway into that area of argumentation, because let's be fair to ourselves. I mean, ministers are ministers. The office of the president is separate and distinct from ministerial portfolios, unless there is a minister of state in the office of the president. And so far, I think there are only 3 of them. Felix Ofosu-Kwakye, and then 2 others, one for climatic change and sustainability, and the other for special initiatives. Yes, so they are ministers of state. That you can say are ministers, so to speak. But the office of the president, Samson, with all due respect, is separate and distinct from ministers per se. So if even there are appointees or personnel in the office of the president whose office is an equivalent of a ministerial role, yes, but they are not nonetheless in the office of the president. So I don't think we should just marry the two.
Okay.
We can look at the caliber of people and the reasons for why those offices have been set up. And those offices have always been with us. Chief of staff, presidential staffers. You can change the nomenclature in the way you like, but they are people who have always, over the years, worked in the office of the president. So if he has told that line, I don't think there's anything significantly wrong with it. But if you add the 3 ministers of state to the numbers that he has rolled out, we are looking for a remainder of about 18, and that will come from deputy ministerial positions.
That's right.
We have 42 as a president. If you add 18, you get 60. The limit he set for himself. So let us all be encouraged, and see whether he will stick within those limits. Because if there are 23 ministerial offices, because he slashed the number from 30 to 23. So if there's 23 ministers and deputy ministers, that should take us to 46. No, that should take us to 23 times 2. Okay? But I don't know whether some of the ministries are going to be without deputy ministers.
Yeah, we understand so.
That is how it looks like. So then he has 18 to prune out of the 23. So if you take 5 ministerial portfolios out, then you have 18 left out of the 23. So he's bound to appoint 18 deputy ministers of state. Let us see how you can stick. Okay. I think so. Some of the names I can boldly stick out for Govins Kwame Abuja. Of course, as board chairman before, chairman of the governing board of the DVLA, I've had occasion to work with him closely in some areas, and I think he has, apart from sometimes his boisterous nature in Parliament, I think he has what it takes to run that ministry. There are many others.
All right, so let's go around. We'll come back to isolate a couple of issues in the ministerial or appointment processes and look at them a lot more thoroughly. Let me now hear from Suleiman Ibrahima. Sule, are you impressed?
Well, Samson, I would say so far it's okay. The elements that I'm looking at, experience in this, on issues related to the sectors that these people have been appointed. And I noticed that quite a number of the appointees are persons who previously served as ranking members of the sectors to which they have been appointed. You can talk about Gavin Saboja, you can talk about Kessel Atufosen, you can talk about Okujeto Ablakwa, and I think Akando, Kwabnaminta Akando, who is to health. And if you look at the others, it may turn out to be the same. So these are people who, at least as far as parliamentary duty or duties are concerned, may have been following quite closely the developments in the sectors that they have been appointed to. And that, of course, also includes Honorable Sam George for communications. And I think in the past, he's been in the public domain on matters related to communications quite a lot. The other thing that I'm looking at is the age, if I may call it that way, in terms of how relatively youthful the appointments are compared to perhaps President Akufo-Addo's appointees. And if I may give examples, when President Akufo-Addo took over in 2017, if you look at the age of the appointees to the various sectors, so Owusu Afriya Kuto for Agric, he was 67 then. Eric Upuku, who is the Mahama appointee now, is 54. If you look at Ambrose Derry, he was 60 at the time he was appointed, 2017. Muntaka Mubarak, who is taking over the Interior Ministry, is 53 now. Amwakwata for Roads, 65. Gavin Saboja, 51. Kweku Ajumamenu for Health, 61. Minta Akando, 44. Ken Uforiata then, Finance, 58. Atufosen, 46. And it goes on and on and on. You can look at Asla Owusu, 52. Sam George, 40. If you look at the position of Chief of Staff, Fremont Pare was then 69 versus Julius Debra, who is 58 now. In terms of age, about 11 years difference. Trade, Alan was 61, Ufuswe Jare is 50 now. Of course, there were other areas that President Akufo-Addo had also appointed persons who you would say are relatively youthful. Youth and sports, defense, Nitiwul, now is Omane Boama. And so, to a large extent, I think President Mahama is doing well in terms of the next generation of leaders. Of course, that is not to say that it means that they will automatically be better than Akufo-Addo's appointees. We are yet to see that. I also like the idea that the president is, to a large extent from the appointment, giving an indication of how he is prioritizing the whole issue of climate change. And so you have him maintain the Ministry of Environment. You have someone appointed as Minister of State in charge of climate change. And then, of course, you do have the Energy Ministry also renamed Energy and Renewables.
Green transition.
For me, that's an indication that the president is giving some priority to the big issue about climate change, which affects literally everything, whether it's about food security or human security or health, the oceans, the forest reserves that we have and all of that. It's all about, the climate crisis. So it's good to see the president prioritizing that.
That's like a reset of sorts that is happening there. And so that may not match to your opening statement when you said it is okay. Okay is not good. Okay is not excellent. Okay is like you are getting to average, right?
Well, I think that we are yet to see a full complement in terms of deputy ministerial appointments, the chief executives, and all of that. But well, maybe let me upgrade instead of reset my okay to saying that it looks quite good at this stage. But it's not about how good the appointees are or how good the appointments are. It's about how their performance would be. That for me is what is critical. Yes, as I said, the appointees are persons who are quite familiar with the critical issues in the various sectors to which they have been appointed. But sometimes it's not about the skills, it's not about the expertise. I keep saying that at this stage, until something changes, I think our politics and our governance is really about money making. People scramble for positions, people struggle for positions, lobby for positions, because it's all about making money. And we saw under President Akufo-Addo, for example, persons who you would say had decent jobs with the banks, with the insurance companies, and so on. All of a sudden, they leaving to take on positions, within the finance sector. And you would say, look, but if somebody is managing this organization or is a consultant here and so on, why would this person leave this job to become CEO of this or CEO of that? It's all about the monies, the contracts that come with it, the perks, and so on and so forth. So to a large extent, it's about the performance. The president says that he wants to reset the country. He continues to caution the ministers during swearing in that, look, remember that the power you have was given to you by the people, and dare not be arrogant to them, as we saw in the past. I am hoping that they would adhere to that, but not just that, but in terms of the accountability, the transparency, the value for money.
So for you, what will be informing this kind of selection when it comes to the health ministry? He had a pot, and some people are really surprised that you had the Alex Segbefia had been there before. He's not a medical doctor. You had Dr. Victor Bampo. People mentioned that Victor Bampo may get to that job. Dr. Thomas Anaba, Professor Titus Bayu, who just became an MP, was Deputy General Secretary for the Ghana Medical Association. You have Dr. Soji Tete. There is also the new entrant, Professor Grace Ayensu Dankwa. You have Edward Omane Boama. And so to pick a candor who was doing advocacy and is not known to have expertise and trained for this, what do you think could be accounting for that? Because there are people who are disappointed about this kind of, selection.
Yeah, Samson, I share the same view in terms of a few of the sectors, but I think to a large extent, the president may have been sort of compelled by the constitutional provision to select the majority of his ministers from parliament.
I just pointed to two of the doctors here, three of them actually, who have just become MPs. So he could also pick them. Thomas Anaba, Grace Ayensu, and Titus Bayu, two professors who are specialists in the area.
Yeah, certainly these are very, very accomplished people. I know Dr. Thomas Anaba very well. Dr. Anaba is literally a brother. We come from the same area. I know his contributions to the party. After
the change of government, he was quote unquote hounded out of the Ridge Hospital as a director, exactly. Right?
And he went to court, served on the manifesto committee in relation to health and all of that. So he's been quite a very, very robust supporter and a key contributor to the party. But when you talk to a lot of people with experience in our governance architecture, they would normally say, oh, well, the president may not usually want to give a ministerial position to a first-time member of parliament. And I think, again, that could have been the other consideration. So selecting the majority from parliament, which is a constitutional requirement, and then the whole idea about, well, the president is also looking at persons who may have been in parliament for a couple of times, are familiar with legislative processes, are familiar with the issues at the committee level, and would be able to perhaps hit the ground running. I suppose that those may have been some of the constraints.
Okay, so you hold your thoughts there. We'll return and look at some of them in some specifics. Let's come to Oliver now. What do you say about the appointments?
I think for me, one of the things I'm most impressed by is the president's commitment to appoint the entire cohort of cabinet at least within 14 days. It seems like he's managed to do that. So there's a level of expediency that we are seeing in respect to that. But appointment decision-making at the ministerial level is not only a presidential decision. And I know that, of course, the buck stops with the president, but the process by which people get appointed deeply involves the party and even sometimes other constituents beyond the party. And it's a tough job trying to balance all of that. At the end of the day, the president is hoping, rather than say that he has full confidence in everybody in the team, that he brings the leadership that will be able to drive all of them towards a certain goal. He doesn't have those assurances. What's particularly, as Honorable Minister was saying, that politicians generally, when they treat how they have treated the public thing in the past, gives room for concern. And we do know, from our experience of governance, that within the next 4 years, we're going to have likely scandals, people who have stepped out of line, and how the presidents react to them, and is where the test of leadership actually is, not in the initial appointments. But the big thing we ought to be looking forward, we have to avert our mind to, and I think Bash was talking about, was the legal constraint. The biggest of it is the Affirmative Action Act. It says that within the 2024 to 2026, you must have 30% of the ministers. Now, that means 18 people. You have appointed 7. Out of that 18 left, he has to appoint females who are 11 of them. So that's what the biggest...
How about the constitutional injunction for regional balance? All of that.
So as I understand now, almost every region is represented.
Yes.
In that. So those considerations also kind of injunct and hold the hand of the president in this. On the question of, the majority ministers coming from parliament, I think we're not dealing with a majority here. This is the super majority. Because if you take out the regional ministers, you have left with 26. Out of that 26, 23 are MPs. So that's overwhelming majority of substantive cabinet, including cabinet positions and other positions as well. Then within that 23, I think there's one of them, Isufu Seido, was reported from the presidency as MP, but in fact, he didn't win the seat in Gambaga. So the bigger question for me, as I'm thinking, I think we're going to have a holistic conversation even in terms of constitutional review, is this vexed question about whether or not we can continue to appoint ministers from within Parliament, considering that the convention is evolving that, Suleiman was talking about first-time MPs, maybe not getting an appointment. There's a certain, insistence on parliamentary.
So do this for me. You hold your breath. We take a break. When we return, I do my quick take, and then I come to you to develop your point about your assessment of the ministers. Then we will take some specific areas to look at before we go to the next issue. This is Newsfile, it's the most authoritative news analysis platform. And here on Newsfile, as always, we put Ghana first. We'll be right back. You're welcome back. This is Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news analysis platform. And here on Newsfile, as always, we put Ghana first. Now, here is something at stake. And this part 2 of punishing the criminal vigilante takeovers. In part 1, I pointed to how the ritual thuggery by party foot soldiers in locking out and violent takeover of government offices was not only unconstitutional but punishable as crimes, because the threats of harm, threats of death that are being issued to these people, officers, assaults that is happening, trespass onto property and damage to property as well, are all arrestable offenses in Ghana. But just somehow we're seeing the police acting unable to deal with this. How funny. Where outgoing officials are caught looting, and we have seen some footages to that effect, you can exercise what is a constitutional right to take evidence to prevent it from happening, or you can effect what is known as citizens' arrest. So when these young people, you gather together and go to a place, you feel there's some looting of government property going on, you can take evidence of what is happening and bring in the police. You are required by law to hand over the suspect if you arrested someone. You are not supposed to manhandle them. You're supposed to hand them over to the nearest police officer or police station. And sometimes your fear is that they will not do what is useful. So police the process and make sure they are taken into custody and dealt with. But one effective way to stop this embarrassing ritual is for government to pay attention to the structures as set up by the transition law. There is urgent need to resource the Office of the Administrator General and the estate unit as created by the law. The law's requirement is that there should be handing over notes prepared not later than 30 days before the date of the presidential election. Before the presidential election. All the ministers and appointees must have their handing over notes ready. And they are supposed to submit these handing over notes to this Administrator General. The last time we heard about this Administrator General, his office is not attended to at all. He didn't even have a functioning vehicle to do his job. And he has a very big job to do. He takes these handing over notes. He's supposed to retain a copy. He or she is supposed to then take a copy to Parliament, to the Chief Justice, and to the Council of State. And then he would make some copies to be kept at the Public Records and Archives Department. This person is actually appointed with terms, the same terms and conditions, the same as a Justice of the Court of Appeal. But look at how we're treating that office. It's not even fit for purpose. There's a presidential estate unit that the Administrator General is supposed to manage. And among his duties is to take and keep an inventory of the assets and properties of the government. All properties and assets which are not vested in the Lands Commission. He is supposed to take care of them and ensure that the assets and properties of government are maintained in good condition and in tenantable repair. And he's supposed to ensure that the assets and properties of government are transferred in good condition and tenantable repair. Tell me, we gave ourselves a good law, but we are not making sure that that office and the officer are doing their job. Those who are supposed to vacate residential facilities for the president and the vice president, of course, midnight, the president ceases to be, they are supposed to leave. But for the other people, they are giving at least 3 months within which to leave their residences. So there's no point for party foot soldiers to invade people's homes and ask them to leave because the term of a government has expired. And perhaps maybe we should look at amending this law or our laws in a way that we can do the transition in the manner that is done elsewhere, like in the US. Trump had not taken over office, but he had made his appointments, and his appointees were going through the confirmation process. We wanted to do a process where Parliament, the elections will be taking a little back. We stopped it. Can we do that? That will be my take. The unnecessary, violent thuggery and takeovers must stop. And it is criminal, so the police must act. Now, let me get back to here in the studio. I won't take a break. Let me get back to my guest. And it was Oliver who was making a point in his assessment of the ministers. And if you are just joining us, our guests are Bashiratu Kamal, Fellow Center for Social Justice. Inus Afuseni is a former member of parliament and former minister, Frank Davis, is chairman of the Constitutional and Legal Affairs Committee of the NPP. Oliver Bakavomawo is Constitutional Rights and Policy Strategy Advisor at the Democracy Hub. And Suleiman Ibrahima is Executive Director of the Media Foundation for West Africa. Yes, so you were making a point where we stopped about the balancing act, gender, and I asked the question also about the constitutional injunction on the president to keep a certain regional balance.
Yeah. And I mean, I think when Suleiman was talking, he also brought in other considerations about youth and other things. Bashira to talk about disability. There are different constituencies across the country that want to be represented in the president's appointment and want to see themselves within that. So it doesn't necessarily mean that the process of who is chosen would be the best man for the job. It's political. The appointments ensure that there's a certain balance. But the bigger question for us is whether or not the civil service that they're going to be superintended over can function effectively with irrespective of the minister's maybe supposed weakness on the subject matter or any other thing. There's also a big question that we've been talking about now on the assessment whether or not we should go beyond the 60 mark or otherwise. One of the bigger issues is that there's no think tank or independent study that has established what is the efficiency mark, where that is where, for a country like Ghana, in terms of our resources and everything, if you appoint this number of ministers, that is where you have achieved the most effective. In fact, the CRCC, I think, work and the validation process, I think the reason why they ended up 55 is because Bawumia had promised 50, John 60, and so let's aim for the middle.
55. Chairman Sabosu confessed on this platform that he influenced
that the process will go to 55,
somewhat,
right? Yeah.
but the committee did not actually agree to it. So they have left their 25 and the 55 as an alternative.
Yeah. And one of the things you mentioned, and I think the last time we had a conversation about this 25 suggestion, was the sneaky appointments of moving people into areas that are similarly ministerial but not quite, because the name is what you're trying to avoid. But one of the things that I know generate a lot of controversy, one, the number of ministers, but also the number of people in the presidency. And so I think what's more likely we're going to see is that a lot of people are going to be appointed technical advisors, special advisors to ministries. This is what Kufuor did many years back. And a lot of that is going to happen because what is driving the conversation is look at the number of MPs you have. You must sort everyone out. And of course, the people who feel like they have made contributions.
Let's remember whatever Kufuor did in the presidency did not match Akufo-Addo, which Samuel Kujeto, raised the red flags about almost 1,000.
Listen, I think that I have treated that era as the dark days. So I avoided to use it for any useful constitutional reference, any conventional practices. We want to get away from that.
Yeah.
But I think that they are going to end up in the ministries. And when they end up in the ministries, we don't see them as part of the number of the presidency. So we have to watch for that for those who are interested in efficiency and all of those conversations. What is disappointing to me, and I think that politicians are continuing to allow to do this, is the mobilizing of individuals to attack party offices and things like that because people have been left out of office. Let's be frank. A lot of people know who are behind them, of the mobilizing young people to do this. And so the conversation about criminal accountability should not only extend to the individuals involved, but some of the people who are bankrolling and moving to, it has to stop. There has to be a point where, there's a certain maturity to how we do government.
You are suggesting that if a group of NDC people in the Volta region ban their office because they are dissatisfied with the appointment, there must be some big person involved. If a group of NDC supporters say, we're going to the GRA because we are not happy with the appointment there, or we are massing up to the NCA because we are not happy with the appointment, we think the guy is MPP, there must be some big guy.
Listen,
who is the real beneficiary.
I have done mobilization for a long time. People don't just stand up and mass up. I can't declare, even for myself and what we do, declare here that meet me here tomorrow and 100 people will show up. It's not going to work. There's a process of calling up people and writing them and telling them this and that, and so let's show up and do something. So if we are treating it as a normal criminal act, then investigative processes must be, activated to be able to, because it has happened so many times when we sweep it around the carpet. I don't know how many people have ever been prosecuted over these things. And remind you, party assets are public assets.
That's right.
By the law and what the Constitution, the Supreme Court has said. And so this is not something that we continue to sweep under the carpet, to allow room for people to be disgruntled and things like that. Everybody is entitled to be disappointed when not appointed to some process. But what you don't have is the right to be able to take the law into your whole hands in this matter. There's no entitlement to it.
Okay. So now let's get around over the same appointment issues. And Honorable Minister of Sene, beginning with you, this envoy to the Alliance of Sahelian States, do you think ECOWAS will be happy about it? Does this sound like an endorsement of these military juntas who have broken away from ECOWAS in a violent way? ECOWAS is not happy about that they should restore democracy?
I think the starting point to answering your question is to look at page 160 of the manifesto of the NDC. And let me read what paragraph 7.1 subparagraph 3 says on page 160 of the manifesto.
And you know also that the president, and I'm saying this to make time for him to get his page that he's referring to, Tuare was invited to the inauguration or swearing in of President Mahama. He got the loudest applause, but the questions also came up. Is it seeking to embrace these military people, or he's rather seeking to influence them to return to democracy? Yes, what's your point?
So there's a two-paragraph preamble on our international relations and foreign policy. That details where we were, how the relationship, foreign relations have been marred by certain decisions that we have taken, how NDC intends to reset our foreign relations. And particularly to this end, the next NDC government will, paragraph 3 or subparagraph 3, work strategically to reintegrate the fraternal countries of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger into the economic community of West African states for enhanced regional stability. That's what we say. So the invitation of the head of state of Burkina Faso was strategic. The appointment of Bavolo, strategic, directed towards working with these countries to reintegrate them into ECOWAS. So John Dramani Mahama is not doing anything behind ECOWAS. I mean, he's committed to ECOWAS. He's also committed, as a government, the NDC government is committed to working closely with ECOWAS and the AU. And if you look at our national interests, I mean, it is important to...
Vigilante is a former military official, army official, right? With the feared, regiment of the army. Of course, we also know that he is multilingual,
yes,
so he can fluently express himself when he meets these people. He's accomplished when it comes to international relations, nonetheless.
He was advisor at ECOWAS.
That's correct.
Okay, on military matters and security matters. So he's got that experience. And who is better suited to speak to military men than the former military man who is respected? Who is better suited?
So what's the purpose? What's he going to be telling them?
The purpose was to get them to understand. And people have said, and I agree with them, that the Burkinabe head of state coming to participate in the inauguration of John Dramani Mahama will at least take something away. That your legitimacy as a head of state is enhanced if you receive an overwhelming support from your people through the ballot box. You saw it clearly. It's clearly. And that if given an opportunity, I'm sure as we continue to look at Burkina Faso, in their transition to democracy, probably the head of state will want that.
Interesting. What do you say about the minorities' accusation that there are appointments being made, particularly to the presidency, in violation of the Presidential Office Act, which requires consultation with the Council of State? The Council of State is yet to be constituted. The EC has just advertised the elections.
Exactly. I like your concluding bit. So it reveals what Vamawo and others and Magusef have been saying, that reveals a design flaw or structural flaw within our constitution. The constitution thinks and anticipates that by the time a president makes his appointments, a council of state will be in place. Okay? That is the position of the constitution. And so the Presidential Transition, the Office of the President Act takes that view and says that, so if a president is to appoint people to the office of the president, he needs to consult the Council of State. But as we speak, there is no Council of State. Was John Mahama willful? Or was it a reckless neglect?
He's supposed to wait until the Council of State is in place.
So I say that we should look at it. Thinking about that, when I heard the minority say what they said on the floor of Parliament, I said, look, was it the intention of the framers of the Constitution that we must have a Council of State that straddles governments? Was that their intention? Because otherwise, there was no way a Council of State whose term of office is coterminous to the office of the president can be in place when the president is making appointments.
The president
so you must look at the design,
and the president who cannot wait.
Cannot wait. The business of government cannot wait. So you have to look at the design or structural flaw and fix that. And when you fix that, you will get the Office of the President Act right.
Okay, hold on. Sule, what do you make of these two situations about the Ibrahim Touare's coming in and, not more importantly, designating an envoy, Lardy Bevrolate, to the Sahelian Alliance of Sahelian States, these places held by military juntas, and this question of appointments in violation of the requirement to consult Council of State?
Well, Samson, I think that I should say I was in the course of this week, Tuesday and Wednesday. Wednesday and Thursday. I was privileged to be part of a regional level engagement of very high level representatives from civil society, from multilateral organizations, including senior officials from the AU and ECOWAS. And from the conversation, this was one of the things that came up. And the indication that I got was that I think the best foot forward for ECOWAS now, in terms of the ongoing engagements and mediation efforts to get these three countries to stay, the best foot now appears to be President Mahama. He's been there before as president, had good relations with these three countries. And if you remember, Burkina Faso took a very serious exception to what President Akufo-Addo did when he visited the US in terms of accusing the Burkinabe authorities of using their mineral resources to pay Russia to do certain things. And obviously the president had to send a delegation to basically try and soften the anger on the part of the Burkinabes. Now, the other thing is that at the ECOWAS level, we know that the president of Senegal and the president of Togo have been appointed to sort of mediate and try and see if they can bring these people back. The truth of the matter is that, of course, every president is president, but we do know that the Senegalese president, fairly young, hadn't actually been in politics before. And so in terms of experience and all of that, I think it's a bit on the downside. You talk about Togo, and people say that, look, these guys, what they've done in their three countries, the Burkina, Mali, Niger, we are talking about undemocratic governance, throwing away the constitution, or abrogating the constitutional order and so on. And people say that the president in Togo is literally doing the same thing. This is someone who opposed to efforts to have term limits, somebody who keeps changing the constitution, and the latest he did was to amend the constitution and have himself as prime minister. Meanwhile, there is no president, and basically have himself in power for life. And how can ECOWAS that says, look, we are opposed to unconstitutional governments and undemocratic processes, have this person to lead the mediation? So I think President Mahama, is taking some strategic steps to bring these people back.
Okay.
In terms of the Council of State and the ministerial thing, I'm not a lawyer, as you know, but I think if the law requires that, it is possible to do it. Between the period when the president is declared president-elect, all the way to swearing in, nothing stops the president from having, those that he wants to nominate as Council of State members nominated, because it's not all by elections. And in fact, if the Constitution requires that, as soon as the president is elected, we can do the election for the regional representatives, knowing very well that as soon as the president is sworn in, there must be a Council of State that enables him to make appointments. But we don't create a situation where the Constitution requires it, no effort is made to fulfill the constitutional requirement, and then we say, oh, it's impossible because once the president takes over, there is no way he can have the Council of State in place before.
Thank you. Let me go to Frank Davis and also Bashira too. Yes, Frank Davis, what do you say? If we need to unite some people within the region, Mali, Burkina, Senegal, Niger, why should that be the job of Ghana? Is it not an ECOWAS job?
Yes. Thank you, Samson. In the first place, I think my good friend Inusa struggled to justify what went on. But I must say, with the greatest of respect, that I just had to bow down my head in shame when I saw the Burkinabe military junta head of state or government or whatever come to the inauguration, and the young man came strapped, with a gun by his side, and he was looked on all the way to go and shake hands with our president with still his gun by his side. Come on. You see, no matter what Inusa says, my good friend Inusa, I want to disagree with you, like people say, violently on this matter. We should not, for the fun of it, do things that will come back to haunt us. Now, in any event, if I'm to go by your logic, how come he invited only the Burkinabe head of state and left out Mali and Guinea? I think they are a holy trinity. So why do you invite one and leave the other? Look, this business of government is business of government. This is not to encourage him to know that democracy is good. That young man knows what is democracy. And he knows that you can only be elected president of your country when the people have voluntarily gone to the polls to elect you as their leader. You don't pick up a gun and go and sack a democratically elected government and think that you have the support of the people. Yes, we all see when these things happen, the people rise up, and they say all kinds of things. But deep down, people know that it is wrong. So he should be told that whatever he did was wrong. And for him to come to our inauguration in the midst of the international community and all that, what are we? Look, even if Mahama, even if His Excellency John Mahama is the best person for that slot, whatever he has to do should not be overt. It should be covert. He should do it in a way, maybe appealing to them as a backside, but to front them as if a democratic change of government can translate into a coup d'etat. And if I might stretch it, that is what is happening all over the place. People are running into offices, closing down offices, demanding that people should leave their offices for them to take over. Such unnecessary interference with our governance. Because they have seen a military head of state come to this country. So they think that the democratically change of government from the NDC to the NPP is a coup d'etat. So they go to offices and ransack offices. The military. In
2017, no military person came to the inauguration, but these takeovers happened.
Yes, Samson, you cannot read the mind construct of any human being. If I stand with you, Samson, and we are talking, you cannot for the minute anticipate that I'm going to stab you. But that is a human mind. That is the construct. So even if in 2017 they were not invited, and their military juntas, you can't hold a democratically elected government responsible for that. I mean, who told them to go and pick arms? If they wanted to be president, they should have contested for elections. So I don't buy that argument. They have decided that they will do it because they know that at the end of the day, some other governments will side with them and go and make amends and peace with them. But we should let them understand that at any particular point in time, what they do, anybody who picks up the gun to unlawfully terminate the governance of the democratically elected government should be told that what you have done is wrong. If they have decided to form their own court, we should leave them.
Okay.
We should do it in a very responsible manner, but not openly.
Yeah.
And I think
quickly, what's your solution to the absence of Council of State when the president is constituting his office?
Yes, I think I want to side greatly with the last speaker. What was his name?
Sulemana.
Sulemana, yes. You see, we should find time for things which are necessary and don't devote time to things which are not necessary. Now, there is a huge and ample space between when there's a president-elect and when he's sworn in. The process of constituting the Council of State, I don't think is so enormous that it cannot be done. Now, the office of the president-elect, whatever that nomenclature means, it founds no grounding in our constitution. There's nothing like that. But on that same strength, His Excellency the President constituted an oral committee. He constituted an oral committee within that period. Now, why couldn't that period be used to also pick nominations for the Council of State? Because that is imperative. That is a constitutional imperative.
Would you have supported that even before he is sworn in, he should constitute the process for a Council of State?
Well, but if he was minded to constitute a committee of oral, I mean, why couldn't he have that fortitude to do that?
Council of State is a constitutional body.
I know something, but I'm just drawing an analogy. So don't let me. All I'm saying that we can find the time to do things which are necessary, and we should not always bargain with the issue of lack of time, because if something has to be done, it ought to be done.
Okay.
So let us, all of us, try that within the constraints of time, we will be minded to do things which are right.
Thank you very much.
We can't find ways of doing these things if we put our mind to it. That's all I'm saying.
Thank you.
Even though it's a bit challenging, but whatever we set our minds to do, if we have the sense of conviction and purpose, we are able to do it.
Thank you very much. Bashiratu Kamal, what do you say? Hello, Bashiratu. Please unmute your mic. Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Yes, can you take the question again?
What do you say about the issues of unconstitutionality in appointing presidential staffers, where there's a requirement to consult with Council of State and there's no Council of State, military juntas in the sub-region, in the Sahel, we have an envoy to go and work with them?
Well, I think that in terms of the constitutional matters, what is quite interesting are two things that Samson, you picked up, and also Alhaji Fuseni also picked up. And that has to do with the issue around election organizing and the period for swearing in. And the question would be, do we think it would be right like that for a president-elect to begin making appointments before the swearing in? But then what are the implications for that? And we've always complained about the period between elections, 7th December, after the elections and the collation and declaration, and the time that is available for a president-elect to prepare and the transitional team to also get ready for the handing over period. But we've always complained that it is too short a time. And in the past, we've also made arguments around, in the case of runoff, it is always hectic for Ghanaians. And
That's
it
right.
is always an issue that puts a lot of pressure on all of us. So it is a critical thing that needs to be looked at. Then on the issue about the appointment, Frank made a comparison between ORA and the appointment by the president. And the question would be, where in our policies or constitutional mandates do we have ORA written? And whether there are any constitutional issues surrounding whether ORA is a committee that should stand or should not stand, or the president had a right to do it or had no right to do it in that way. So I think in terms of the constitutional mandates of the president, it's clear. ORA is just a committee that the president promised Ghanaians in the manifesto of the NDC, and he did just that. And there are no constitutionalities around surrounding the issue of having ORA instituted. Then on appointment, I mean, you see, it is quite interesting that Ghanaians have already started asking for accountability. People are asking accountability in terms of when is the dollar coming down? We need a president to act on this. School feeding program. There are a whole lot of issues coming.
Galamsey.
So imagine if we, Galamsey, you know, there was a presser recently. So imagine, and you see, also let us remember that some of our institutions are seasonal in nature in terms of the type of work that they do. A critical example is Ghana Cocoa Board, that their activities are seasonal. So if there is no chief executive and the season for planting and doing specific thing passes, it means we have all lost out. So in this sense, do we wait for the president, for the Council of State to be constituted before the president makes appointment to some of these critical institutions? But we know the implication it is going to have on all of us. So like Lardy mentioned, there is, we have an opportunity to look at some of these things to do right by ourselves, so that we do not come back to having these discussions every other 4 years. Now, finally, on the issue about the juntas, I'm not a security expert, but what I can say is that we are in the crossroads of having the collective interests, that is by being members of ECOWAS, and our individual interests as a country. And also balancing it all. Maybe, just maybe, I'm just speculating that the president didn't just invite Traore, but extended invitation to them. And then they decided to settle on him representing the other people. So for now, we are not sure whether he's the only person the president extended invitation to. There also is the issue about what is our relationship with these countries in terms of trade, in terms of other critical issues. So do we allow the issues that is currently running in ECOWAS, when we are not sure when it is going to be resolved, mar the relationship we have with them so that it affects every other thing that we do with them in terms of our bilateral relationship with all of them as a country? It's something we also need to think about.
Okay.
And why thinking about let me say this, that one critical issue that came up at the Democracy Hub program has been, until we are able to work around issues around funding for political parties, we are always going to come back to these issues about appointments and people feeling so entitled, because we do not know what has happened behind closed doors with regards to funding for these political parties. So people negotiate, people struck deals, you know, to send money or to support political parties, and it is something that we need to look at.
Right, that was an issue. That was an issue that Professor Kofi Abuchi was very passionate about. But in 30 seconds, tell me, were you one of those who was not also, you know, enthused about the appointment of Joyce Bawah Muktari? You had expected that she would get foreign minister or some other ministerial, properly so-called job?
Yes, to be honest with you, Samson, I was very disappointed. Also because, I mean, she's done this job with the president for 8 years or whatever years, and she's been doing it. So why would we still want to keep her there? But also, it comes back to the point about in whatever position that you find yourself, it is about you and how you make the position.
Thank you very much.
Attractive and effectiveness and efficient. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I think I saw that you expressed disappointment in that appointment.
Yes. I mean, I'll come. Well, let me perhaps start with it and come to the other issues. One of the biggest thing about Joyce's role with the NDC is that she has the misfortune of being a relative of the president. And because of it, a lot of people continuously view her as somebody who must be in a role of special aid, special assistant to the president, things like that. But we are seeing what she has done in terms of championing policy issues in terms of how the NDC has contested the elections and her role in the process. And I'm thinking that for her own maturity within the party and how she's perceived, a role that removes her away from the president is perhaps something which is better for her in terms of, long term. And that's why I think that an appointment other than back to the presidency or special aid would have been best suited for her. And I was disappointed that it feeds into this thinking and narrative that, Joyce is family, and so she'll serve with their cousin. That's where my disappointment is.
Our presidents are known to keep their family close to them.
Well, I haven't seen that
part of their own protection.
I haven't seen that a lot of them. I mean, I remember Kufuor with the brother as Minister of Defense, but I haven't seen that much here. But she has been, she has been Deputy Minister before. So I think she was Transport.
Okay.
So that's what my thinking there. And it's not a view that Kujitua Blackwell, who is a very good friend of mine, does not deserve the role. It's more a question of whether she should go back into that role again.
Right.
On the other issues, yes, there was a diplomatic faux pas in the president's appointment of Bevlo, but not that the appointment itself. So one of the things, there's the alliance of Sahel states. And it's true that ECOWAS appointed an envoy, but the difference is that ECOWAS appointed a special envoy to the 3 states, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. We have appointed an envoy to the alliance of Sahel states, which is a recognition of the so-called regional body in competition with ECOWAS. So in terms of the nomenclature, that's where probably there's a problem is, because you're mindful careful what you are recognizing in terms of your diplomatic footprint. But however, in terms of the attempts of rapprochement, I think it's spot on. And the appointment of Bevlo being a security person, the principal reasons why they left ECOWAS were for security reasons. And that they're saying that they're changing or reforming their alliance is for security reasons. They're saying that there are nations at war and so need the military in charge of those countries, whether or not we have diplomatic inclinations or not. I join Frank Davis in his consternations about military and our democracy and things like that. I also truly believe that our presidents are under a constitutional injunction to ensure that democracy is preached abroad. But we should not forget that the Guinean president who had changed his constitution to allow his third term was the one who was invited when Nanado was being sworn in to speak. A few days after that is when he was overthrown because he tried to change his constitution. So if you're asking for diplomatic consistency, we need to have that. I know that there was a delegation led by Alfred Mahama to both Mali and Niger as well to invite those presidents. In the end, they were represented by their prime ministers. So it's not that it's only Traoré who was invited to the event, but all the others were also invited as part of the president's attempt to do rapprochement on this issue. So if the long-term objective, which aligns with what the NDC is saying, that they want to bring them back to the fold, I think it's a good thing. I have seen report that Nyasigbe is also planning to join the alliance. But we must truly question ECOWAS on this. If somebody like Nyasigbe can change the constitutional rules and democratic rules and continue to stay in office, and we are claiming that there's some democratic ethic that exists within ECOWAS itself, I don't think that's consistent.
Let me understand you. In one breath, you begin by saying this is a diplomatic faux pas. To me, is a significant embarrassment or mistake to have appointed Bevlo for this job.
Not for the job, to the alliance of Sahel states. So you can appoint a special envoy to the countries. But if you appoint to the alliance of Sahel states, you have recognized the alliance.
Okay.
Which is not ECOWAS's position.
I get that.
So that's where it is in terms of the nomenclature of that.
All right.
But yes, in terms of appointing somebody to lead the charge, I think that it has to happen, and it's good that it's Bevlo who understands the concerns of these states in that role.
The constitutional situation, is it a lacuna we need to fill, or
with the Council of States?
Yes.
No, actually, there's no problem with the Constitution on that.
Well,
I mean, my views are well known.
You don't want a Council of States?
No, yes, my views are well known on that. Yes. But the problem actually here is not constitutional.
Okay.
That we are trying to contort ourselves to give the president-elect to share executive power with existing president. No. The problem is the Presidential Office Act, which brings the Council of State and gives it a statutory role which badly anticipates the question of timing. So the reform would be to the Transition Act. You can remove the Council of State as it has no play in who is appointed to the office of the president, and the problem is solved. So it's not a constitutional mandate. It's something the Parliament gave them and misjudged the timing on that one.
Interesting. So I'm going for a quick break. We'll return to go to Obuasi to find out what exactly happened. An eyewitness that Joy News spoke about the fact that they were in excess of 300 of them and that they were just looking for their daily bread. And these are abandoned pits, mining pits by AngloGold that they went to. Well, they needed to break some walls, fences to get in there. And these are also manned by the military. The military high command, the statement they issued. Now, this eyewitness says that when the military came on them armed, all of them went on their knees, pleading with them that they had not come there to cause trouble, but to find food. And nonetheless, they started to fire, their guns, and as they ran, they shot at them from the back, leading to the several deaths that happened and the many who have been injured in the circumstances. But the military statement said that these guys went there in the night around 1 p.m., midnight, and began to shoot at the armed officers. And the armed officers also had to, as it were, protect themselves. In self-defense, they shot. Which of these accounts do you believe? Well, you may not have to believe any of them. Let's get to some of the details to find out which of the accounts may be closer to the truth. I'll share some of your messages with you also shortly. But before we take the break, is there any substantial issue you want to reply to or something of the sort? Any one of you?
No.
Okay.
Well, no substantial issue, except that I agree with
yes, you and then yes, I'll come to you. Yeah.
So there are two in the Office of the President Act and the Constitution. There are two approaches. One, if the Constitution, amend the Constitution will take you, a long process. Yes, it's a matter of mistiming. Do we remove the consultation of Council of State and say probably inform Parliament? Okay, because the Council of State would not have been in existence at the time that. So you need a second institution to know what the president is doing, and the Constitution settled on the Presidential Act settled on the Council of State, and now there's a problem. So we can amend the Constitution. So I've been looking at the two. So I agree with you entirely.
Okay, but you had said earlier that it's a question of practicality, like Suleimana and also Frank Davis. We can constitute the Council of State as quickly as possible. So why don't we do it? Maybe we go back to when Marita Brew went to Parliament seeking to bring back the elections to November rather than in December. So we have sufficient time to do all of these things.
Then you have to settle on the issue of what role does a president-elect play.
That's right.
In the constitutional architecture.
Thank you. Yes, Frank Davis, you wanted to say something.
I heard my sister, was the name Bashiratu, say something about my comments on the oral, but I want to place this on firm record that you see when we try to let things pass and not comment on it, becomes a problem. You see, there's nothing about the fact that there was an office of the president-elect. But that office of the president-elect has no constitutional mandate. There's nothing, nowhere in the Constitution that you see office of the president-elect. There's nothing. I'm yet to see anything of the sort. So if the president-elect and not sworn in, he is a de facto president, he's not de jure. We are all lawyers, you know that. So within that space of time of him being the president-elect and being sworn in, what executive authority does he exercise? Because there's always a sitting president before the midnight of 6th January. And that office of president is not coterminous with the office of the president-elect, whatever that means.
Professor Kweku Asare has asked questions. He and Oliver have been asking that President Mahama has constituted a Constitution Review Committee. There has not been hue and cry about it as to what mandate he has to do that. but he constitutes an oral committee and hell breaks loose. Why?
Samson, I'm commenting on something someone said. So let's deal with it. There's a special devoted space for constitution. So when we get there, we'll discuss this. But let me talk about it, because this oral thing is gaining too much prominence, and we have to put it where it belongs. You see, there is nobody. I'm not questioning the setup of that committee. I think if we have to do things right, we have to do them properly. All I'm saying is that the office of the president-elect does not warrant the president sworn in now setting up a committee of oral, because there is no constitutional basis for it. So people should not say that it is not constitutional. There is no office like office of president-elect, for which at the time that President Mahama constituted that committee, what executive authority he exercised. Because the office of the president-elect is de facto, it's not de jure. And there was always a sitting president. So was he competing with the sitting president? That is my question.
Thank you very much.
So don't let us box the two up. I'm not saying the morale for the setup of the committee is fine, but let's do things properly. That's what I'm saying.
Thank you very much. It was supposed to be a minute's reaction. Did Sule indicate that you wanted to say something?
Yes, Samson. On the question of appointments and ministries, I think those of you who are lawyers would do us a lot of good if you were to look at the Security and Intelligence Act 2020, I think it's at 1030 or so, because my reading suggests that once that law is still in place, there ought to be a Minister for National Security, because the law designates a minister, a ministry, provides its functions, and those functions actually include the National Security Coordinator serving under the minister. So at some point, in terms of the functions of the minister, it includes giving directives and directions to the National Security Coordinator, and in fact also includes presenting reports to Parliament. And from what President Mahama brought out, that ministry, as people would say, has been scrapped. And I'm wondering if there is a law requiring that ministry be set up, can we just set it aside and move on? When the minister in charge of that, national security, would be responsible for both the internal security agencies and external security agencies. The Minister for Interior, as we all know, is in charge of internal security issues. So is it possible that, even with the existence of that law, we can just overlook it and then scrap that ministry?
Okay, thank you. So that we don't bring up a whole new issue to get into our time, let's hear you quickly. You wanted to respond to
just
that.
In terms of how we draft legislation, Parliament has no authority or power to create a minister or a ministry. So what you have is that it will say the president will assign ministerial responsibility to somebody over it. So ministerial responsibility can be assigned to defend, the Minister for Defense or any other thing. So a minister responsible for something, a portfolio, and that can be assigned to anybody, but you don't have to appoint a Minister for National Security specifically. On that.
Okay, thank you. We'll take a break here, and when we return, we are going to Obuasi, and one of you watching or listening by radio or however, you say that's Alhaj Suleiman, okay, so watching from abroad, says that eyewitness account is not true. I know people in Obuasi who told me the boys overpowered the first layer of security, private security, then overpowered the second layer, that is police, and then faced off with the third layer, that is the military. That's the kind of security architecture at the place. So to clash with the soldiers, you have to first go through 2 layers of security as described earlier. Interesting. How bold could these people be? We'll be right back.
The NDC must take responsibility for this gruesome murder of the 11 or so people that happened in Obuasi. And incidentally, the people that were killed, very painfully, happened to be members of the National Democratic Congress. The NDC in this instance failed to protect and save the lives of these Ghanaians who are members of their party on the occasion when they died. they failed to protect and save them because they failed to lead, they failed to show leadership, they failed to tell them the truth, they failed to caution them that in this country there are laws. You can't just up and go anywhere just because your party has won an election and therefore terrorize and take over private setups as though they were yours.
So you heard Otumfuo 82, and you also heard Otumfuo 82 the second, and you also heard the NPP's communications director, the Richard Ahiagba. They held a press conference and put the blame squarely at the doorstep of the NDC. I'm sure some of you may have also seen some videos ahead of the elections, a gathering that was an NDC gathering, that the supporters appear to be preparing. That's what they were doing, preparing to, you know, get into galamsey work if their party won power, you know. There's this video also that has popped up, we're told is 2023, where a journalist was also boldly encouraging the youth in that town to besiege the place and mine. Well, what exactly is going on? A good friend of mine says that in 2006, I visited Anglo-Gold, Obuasi, upon an official invitation. I spent almost a day underground. I was told harrowing encounters between staff of Anglo-Gold and illegal miners. It's been several years since. I doubt these encounters will ever end. Why am I reading this message? To give you a glimpse or a reminder of these encounters that have been happening at this place for a long time. In fact, Anglo-Gold has lost officials who have been shot and killed at these places before. So let's get into that. And before that, some of the messages you have sent earlier. Christopher Clover, you say that Mr. David should tell us, you mean Frank Davis, should tell us what the ECOWAS has done for African countries aside from aligning itself strategically with the colonial master's idea. We cannot expect a flamboyant democracy when we use it to dupe the citizens. Let's get serious for once, please. Yesu Holik says that the NPP is merely attacking the government for chaos they have caused instead of genuinely winning the hearts of Ghanaians, With each passing moment, they only deepen their own predicament. K. Amofa says, what is wrong with a military leader of another country attending the inauguration in Ghana, ignoring the effect of Burkina Faso being our neighbor? This is much ado about nothing. Gasma says, Afenyo Markin's advice isn't coming from a good place because he didn't extend same to Baumia. It's tainted with malice. It is meant to cause public anger or disaffection towards the government. I'm glad they have treated it with contempt. Afenyo Markin asked the president to apologize and appoint more because 60 is not enough. Then Harisu Laminu Pandit says, great appointments from the president. Very youthful, highly professional in their fields of work and timely. The appointment committee has also done a good job, irrespective of the challenges. Okay, thanks for those messages. Now, let's hear from our guest on the matter of Obuasi. Maybe I start with you, Oliver, because of your association with getting to the ground and organizing support for people who have been brutalized, the Ashaman situation and all of that. How do you process what we are being told about what happened in Obuasi?
I mean, there's clearly a lot of misinformation, unclear information regarding the incidents that happened that led to the loss of lives there. My consistent advocacy is that where any individual loses their lives at the hand of the state, that it is investigated. In many countries, when whether it's an officer of the law is involved in a shooting incident that kills an individual, immediately they are suspended for an investigation to establish how the person died. And I hope that happens. So we don't rely on just press statements. We have seen that go tragically wrong in the case of Asawase when individuals are claimed to be armed robbers. So we must institutionalize the practice.
And it turned out to be untrue. That turned out to be untrue. Robbers, yeah.
So we must institutionalize the practice if Ghanaian lives mean anything to us. The problem of Obuasi didn't start today, as one of your commenters mentioned. There's an interesting and fascinating article, actually, by one Godfred Apia Oko, which is on grievance and conflicts in Obuasi, on Ghana's gold mining industry, the case of Obuasi, that catalogs from 1990 till now the number of clashes that have happened between the mines and individuals and with the military involved and people dying. There's a bigger question around community participation rights within the governance of our natural resources that we can't, at every time, isolate these incidents when they happen and say, okay, the individuals armed themselves and went there, and then some died, some people were shot, then we have misinformation on that. There's an original sin that we need to address regarding the community's feelings that they ought to have certain participation rights in resources that are mined in their backyard, and how we balance that as a democracy. The constitutional framework we have that vests everything in the state, and then we issue licenses in Accra without great consideration of the people there, and in terms of the administration of the resources, there's no clear pathway to how the communities are benefited. In fact, a lot of the times all you hear is that these companies must perform CSR. We cannot leave it to the private discretion of companies how we set people's entitlement rights or community rights within a natural resources governance system. So I think we need to have a holistic conversation to be able to ensure that we are thinking as a nation long term that these claims and entitlements will not stop here. It happened when the oil was discovered in the Western region. These conversations have come up, and we have examples across the African terrain, whether in Nigeria with the Ogoni and other places, where, in the Delta State, for instance, where it always breeds entitlement. And how you balance that determines whether or not we resolve the conflict. When we're looking for how to structure our oil revenue, we went to Norway and took the Norwegian model, but we should have also talked about the African experiences and how that we can redefine those models to be able to address community needs better. Now here, one of my biggest concerns in terms of how conflict and things happen in this country, it's always the hand of political parties in the conversation. Whether they do so in giving, certain individuals are given a certain assurances that when government change, they can be able to do certain things or not. It has happened in how we weaponize ethnicity, and we must be careful how we weaponize long-term community grievances in order for power. If that's what has happened here, again, it is something that is systemic and endemic. So for me, I want to focus on the larger issues on how we prevent these things from happening again and again. But in this case, and I've talked about the governments have said they want to conduct an investigation. That investigation is necessary for us to unravel the full facts of how they got in there. Now, yes, from a legal and a legalistic point of view, individuals presumably armed themselves, from what some of the accounts are claiming, and went there. We have talked about proliferation of small arms. So there's so many different connected aspects of the problem that we must be able to think about again in terms of arming of illegal miners. We saw these things happen when Erastus was assaulted, that there's a lot of cartelization that is happening within the small scale and mining industry that we ought to be alarmed by. So we are seeing an incident here. There's claims that some of the individuals involved are people who have been emboldened by what you call the takeover culture and things like that is happening. That also has to be addressed. But then the underlying issue of the bigger community and continuous impoverishment has to also be addressed, and how their interests are balanced. We tried it with the local content laws and saying that we want to be able to bring that. But those are after the fact thinking when the framework has already been set somewhere. So that's my take on Obuasi, and I hope that we get to the bottom of it.
Suleimana, what would be how you process what is going on there? We were told about 9 lives were lost, 9 people were killed, and 4 have been in critical condition. Richard Anyagba, in his press conference, was talking about 11 people who were dead or so. long term too, how can we look at this? People have asked the question. This is the place where the gold mineral wealth is, but they are the most impoverished. Go and look at the structures they live in, the air they breathe, the water they drink.
It's certainly a very unfortunate development. These things shouldn't happen. Commiserations to the families that have lost their relatives, really, really painful. But I think these things happen as a result of, how our politics has been structured. Over the years, it's become a matter of your party is in power and it's your time to benefit. And it's not just at the grassroots, it goes all the way from the community level, district level, regional level to national level. And we were talking about even ministerial appointments and how, people at certain party offices ablaze because they are claiming the persons they support or their MPs have not been appointed and so on. So it's this whole sense of entitlement and the fact that during the campaigning, we also, or the politicians or political leaders, end up also giving some assurances, sometimes very unrealistic from the legal and practical side of things. But because of, the crave for voting, certain promises are made. I think this has happened. As Otunfo said, we are not in the banana republic. We are a country governed by laws, or at least a country that must be governed by laws, because sometimes, depending on who is at fault, the law may be working quite differently. But that leads me to this whole point about resetting Ghana that the president talks about. I honestly think that resetting Ghana really is not about just saying that we've reduced the number of ministers, we are urging ministers to be respectful, declare your assets, and all of that. I think to a large extent, it's about reorienting people in terms of mindset, in terms of values, and secondly, making sure that the laws work in a way that is fair, that is just, that is equitable. And therefore, it doesn't matter that it is an NDC president who is in power. If you're an MPP member and you do something that is against the law must work. That's the only way we are going to be able to reset the country, if indeed we would be able to reset the country.
We had one of the eyewitnesses who said they were there, they knelt down, which account is also being contested, say that all they went there was to get their daily bread. He spoke in Twi. He said they didn't go there to cause any trouble. And in any case, this was an abandoned pit. So what's the problem? He doesn't see any issue.
Well, I think we have to contrast that with what you read a while ago, and also the statement that was issued by the Ghana Armed Forces. I don't think it would be fair to discount the contrary accounts being presented. And that, for me, is why sometimes I have a problem with our media. Why would it be that at this stage, almost a week or more into this incident, we are discussing this issue, relying on what people are saying and all of that, rather than media people who have gone to the field and have had interviews with as many people as possible, interview the Ghana Armed Forces to back their claims with evidence, interview the leadership at the district, leadership at Anglo Gold, and all of that. I think we are missing a lot in terms of what the media must be doing. But it takes me back to the whole issue of resetting Ghana. I think, what the Director of Communications for the MPP is saying is basically, as usual, the politics of things. I can understand from the opposition. That is what must be done. But to some extent, I think their government did a lot of damage. Not to some extent. In fact, a lot of damage was done. If you even look at the statistics that has been put out by multimedia, for example, and the number of concessions or licenses that have been issued, from the Rawlings era, you look at it, and it's 2,127, and out of this, the 8 years of President Akufo-Addo is over 2,000 of them, 2,037. Whereas others issued 24, the Rawlings Kufuor did 14, Mills did 7 before his death, and Mahama did 44. So if you put the Mills-Mahama 8 years together, it comes to 51. And then in the last 8 years of Akufo-Addo, 2,037. Yes, it's okay to give licenses to people to work, but who were the beneficiaries of these licenses or permits to go into the field and work? And we saw the consequences. Water bodies that have been polluted, party executives that were in mining. We read the Frimpong Boateng report that eventually got him kicked out of government and so on. And so I think to some extent people felt, well, when the NPP was there, their people were all over, in fact, destroying our environment, destroying water bodies, nothing happened. And therefore, if our party is in power, it means that we can also do whatever we want. If people could cause such significant damage and nothing happened, why not us? But like I said, resetting Ghana means doing things differently, taking the painful decisions, taking the decisions that will make your party and party supporters unhappy and unpopular.
Forgive me, but I don't get the point of your bringing in the issuance of mining licenses by President within Akufo-Addo's time, as in between January 1 and January 6, where 106 were issued, or the more that had been issued earlier. I didn't get the point how that comes in this discussion. You don't buy the explanation by the Minerals Commission that this is the way to resolve the Galamsey issue. You give out licenses and so that you are able to regulate those who are mining.
Well, Samson, I mean, it sounds like a good idea, but is that what we saw? The Fourth Estate, for example, did an investigation into who are the beneficiaries of these licenses and who were they? Party executives, party chairmen, persons at the presidency, sons and daughters of the chief of staff, and so on and so forth. And the people in the communities see the persons who are mining. They are associates. They live in the same community, and they know that, oh, Kofi Mensah is MPP, and today he's mining here, and nothing is happening. Operation Galam stop, whatever is happening, they are still doing it. They are polluting the water bodies, but because they are MPP, we are them.
You are not in any way suggesting that there's a justification for the conduct of these Galamseyers at the Obuasi pit. Absolutely not.
But the point I am making is that why would these people have thought this way? They're thinking that, oh, others did it, and so if others did it and nothing happened.
No, when you are giving a license to mine, you have acquired a license. That is not illegal mining. So how can that be used as the example?
No, Samson, but we are talking about mining that was happening illegally all over. Why did the government set up Operation Galam Stop, Operation This? You go to a place around Ashalibutre and you see all those excavators that have been parked there. If these people were doing illegal mining, why would the government take those steps? Why were the military in the bushes burning and so on and so forth? So a lot of illegal mining was happening. People live with people in communities and they think, oh, others are doing it and it's our turn to do it. But I'm saying this is absolutely a no-no. We are not in a banana republic. I last week put out a tweet saying that in the mining sector, I think it's a sector that requires an immediate presidential action. By now, I think it would have been great for the president to have come out quite clearly on what steps are to be taken on the mining sector to avert some of these things that are happening and to restore our water bodies and our environment. But so far, nothing has happened. And I believe that it's time for the president to really come out and make it clear that, look, the laws are going to be enforced. We are Ghanaians. We must benefit from our natural resource endowment, but we must do so in a way that will not destroy the environment. We must do so legally. We must do so in ways that respect the rights of other people. Other than that, the pattern is going to continue. The NDC folks will think, look, the MPP people enrich themselves through illegal mining. Why wouldn't we do it ourselves also? But as I said, resetting Ghana means taking all the painful decisions, all the things that may make the party unhappy, the party people unhappy, but would be in the national interest. And I think that is what has to happen. What happened is unfortunate, but the laws must be enforced.
Do you believe the narrative, just in a second, some 30 seconds, the narrative that the galamseyers were the ones who went and began to shoot at the armed military officials to attract they also being shot and killed?
What I may be tempted to believe is the fact that they may have succeeded in breaching the first line of security, which would have been the internal company security folks who are often not armed.
Okay.
And therefore, numbers they could have overcome them. But I don't think that any group of Ghanaians would dare see military people and be the first to open fire on the military people. That's really unbelievable.
Mm. And what you see, the map you see there, as I understand it, the pink area that you see is the Anglo-Gold Ashanti operating area for now. And then the outside of it, outside of the pink marking, is the ceded concessions that we heard Otumfuo Osei to speak about a while ago. All right. Let's me now bring in Frank Davis. I'm sure that you, of course, the discussion, it is said that you don't bring in the party stuff, but where there is evidence of some of that, should we be oblivious to that? Richard Anyagba spoke, and for some of us who have seen some of the footages ahead of the election, I think on the eve of elections or so, the gathering of the NDC supporters and the comments that they were making about how they would have to take over places. And I've also referenced to the comments that were made by Captain Smart, I'm told this a year ago, where he invited the townsfolk to besiege the place and mine because they are being starved and so on. All of that can reasonably be linked to what emboldened these people to go there to do what they did.
Yes, Samson. In the first place, let me express my deepest condolences and regrets to the bereaved families. No matter what it is, the loss of a human life is something which is irreplaceable. So when lives are lost in such rather unusual and awkward manner, I think we all have to commiserate and wish that the family finds the strength in these difficult and challenging times. Well, having said that, Samson, you see, most often than not, we allow irresponsible utterances.
Frank David, just a minute. And the video you are seeing there is what I was talking about. This is a gathering of NDC supporters. And you should hear some of the things they were saying just before the elections, right? And so it's not difficult to connect it to what is happening. Yes, go on.
Yes, that's what I was going to say. You see, when we link everything to political mantra, and then people try to hide under these things to perpetuate mayhem and possibly cause loss of death, as has happened in this particular situation. I don't think we should gloss over it and say it is politics as usual. I will condemn it if it's my party. Something, you know me too well. You know me too well for my stance on some of these things. I will condemn it if it's my party. And I'll condemn it if it's otherwise, it's vice versa. You see, when you promise people that when you take over government, you are going to legalize and give them the opportunity to work in the mines, what and how do you mean? And that you goad them on that they should vote for you. And you see, and then your government wins power. And they are not seeing their jobs. What do you expect them to do? This is the situation you put them in. And a journalist who I'm told is so famed, the Captain Smart or whatever his name is, who I'm told is so famed. I don't want to ascribe to the political leanings people associate him with. It is not my business. Whether he's NPP or NDC is immaterial to the discussion. But this is a famed, so-called famed journalist. And he mounts his platform and then encourages people. I have listened to the language he used. What is that supposed to mean? Where is he now? Where is that so-called Catherine Smart? Now the people have been murdered, whether callously, rightfully or wrong, they have been murdered or killed. They are dead. Where is he? And we are looking on. Nobody say anything. Nobody has called him to order. He has not been invited to any forum. He's just there. And I'm sure he will go on spewing the kind of journalistic nonsense he goes about with.
In fact, he says that he said this in 2023, so we shouldn't link it to it.
Oh, come on, Samson, come on. He said it in 2023, and so what? He said it in 2023, and so that is so irresponsible and childish for a journalist to be saying that. Yes, you said it in 2023, but the election was won in 2024. So they are accurating what you said. He should bow down his ugly head in shame. You see, they do these things, and this is the leeway. And because he has said this, people are quiet. Some say it is about time. It's about time that we stand and leave our mettle. When people do things wrong, they should be held by the head and thrown into jail. This cannot be journalism. And you see, political leaders, I've listened to some excerpts of utterances and speeches that have come out immediately after. And I mean, for God's sakes, the national organizer of the NDC, Yamin or whatever his name is, he should tone down. You see, on some of these bravado acts of show bravado, he should tone down. You see, because we are in very difficult times. If the situation is not managed well, it will turn into something else. And I'll beg, Samson, your crop of journalists, I will beg, if there is a situation, we should all be responsible. Say it as it is, and damn the consequences. You see, when a particular group of journalists try to portray a situation that these people went to the mines, they just went and said, "Oh, we are coming to mine," and they were shot. I mean, something it begs reasoning. You see, because other group of journalists have also come with concise details and a narrative of what actually happened. Let me borrow the words of Otumfuo, the great king. Now there is a concession. Something I heard you say in passing, and maybe you said it in jest. Even if that concession is on mine for the time being, even if it's on mine for the time being, somebody has a legal concession.
It's actually barricaded. There's a fence wall over it. They had to cut the fence wall to get in. Lawfully
and regularly licensed. And then you get up in the community. When the license was being granted, where were you? You get up in the community and claim that you have to eat. So you enter somebody's concession without his license, permission, authority, nothing. And you think you want to go and mine. And then when you suffer this fate, it becomes a problem for that company. Something. I mean, it's about time we look at these things constructively.
Okay.
Take out the political lenses and say it as it is.
All right.
It is irresponsible by all standards. I'm sorry for what has happened. But you see, Ghanaians should learn to be law-abiding.
All right.
This rascality should cease. And you see, there has never been an occasion where a change from one democratically elected government to the other has translated into a coup d'etat. Never.
Okay.
This is what we are seeing.
Thank you, Frank Davis. And Inus of Seni, before I go to Bashira to Kamal, Frank Davis mentions a point that personally I'm concerned about. We talk about media freedoms, but we know that there's something happening on the airwaves that actually jeopardize the media freedoms. And these are being perpetrated by people in the name of journalism, and those who are also operating because of some virtual jurisdictional issues. They are not around, so they know they may not be able to be touched, who are involved in this violent insult fest, just churning out unverified information and actually encouraging people to attack people on live programs. It doesn't matter that there's a caliber of people who want to listen and watch them. It's not useful and it might get us into trouble. What do you say?
Well, I think that everybody, where you are within the jurisdiction or outside the jurisdiction, if you have a platform to educate people, you have a duty to behave responsibly. That duty should manifest in the respect of others, the respect for the views of other people, and the fact that you are communicating to change perception, to change attitudes. And so if you fail in that, then you are failing in your journalistic training. I mean, all of us have a responsibility to act reasonably and responsibly. And so, yes, any journalist who calls on people, and I say that you need to read Hotel Rwanda, understand how it started, to understand how a callous utterance from a journalist can burn a country.
You know, many talk about that, but they don't read and
there are many
the literature on that.
Books on Rwanda, many.
Yeah.
And that started through radio discussion. Rwanda didn't go to war and kill each other and try to annihilate one section of the community because politicians sat down. Politicians sat down to discuss how to overthrow Habamani or what?
Yeah.
That president. That was the discussion.
So
let's come. I think that I still have my moral compass on. And I'll try to talk and speak dispassionately about Galamsey. We need to understand that illegal mining cannot be allowed to go on in this country. If we allow it, we are being irresponsible as a people, because it represents an existential threat to this country. Go to the mining communities. See the number of children who are brought forth deformed. The number of pregnant women who are losing their pregnancies. And then you will understand what we are talking about. Now go and look at the degradation of the environment. Look at the pollution of the water bodies. Understand and study the insecurity at those areas. And you will ask yourself, how can we allow this to go on? In 1989, and I visited Obuasi as a Minister for Lands and Natural Resources.
You have told us here how your very life was in danger for seeking to enforce the laws.
Yeah, so I had to hang a camera in my office. But I deactivated it when I was leaving. It became an issue when Akufo-Addo won.
Yeah, I remember that.
Because people actually told me that my life was in danger. And I wanted to know anybody coming to my office must be recorded. Because you will know when you come into the office, you close the door. So you don't know who is coming in to harm you. So if they succeed in harming me, in killing me, at least the camera will reveal who did it. But politics entered. And then we must take politics out of it. Look, you sit in Accra, you think you are far insulated. You are insulated against the ravages of Galamsey.
No, it's right here.
It's right here.
The
oranges that you drink.
If we cross the borders, we have had experts tell us about that.
The oranges that you drink, if they come from Galamsey size, you know that the hard metals that are in it, the banana that you eat. I mean, let's be real. It's a no-no. Yes, even when I was at the Ministry of Lands and Natural Resources, we had said that concessionaires who had fallow land could give those fallow lands to legal small-scale miners and Baker. In fact, there is participation rights. It's the impunity that we condemn and abhor. But there's participation. See, because the Galamseyers, until they started introducing heavy machinery, were only mining surfacely. And so if you are going to do surface mining, well, you don't. The concession holders can still do underground mining because you can't get there. But in Obuasi, people dug tunnels and connected with the shafts. And I went there and saw it myself. It's not about politics. The people who went there, it's unfortunate that they were killed. And I have another concern. We have said as a country that we cannot justify the participation of state institutional mechanisms or agencies in the protection of private property. And so if we give a concession to a concessionaire, that concessionaire has a duty to obtain his license to operate by a combination of things that he will do. Will he identify the small-scale miners in that area, partition part of his land, and get them onto the concession and ensure that they mine in accordance with acceptable practices and not destroy the environment? That he becomes a good citizen of the community, and that the community will elect to protect. What do they do? Do they just go there because they think that they have got the concession and they mine and exclude everybody? Or what do they do? So they must purchase their license to operate. So how come that the military, and Captain Mohammed's or Major Mohammed's case is a case in point. How come that the military were there and they opened fire? Was there no other way to contain the people who were charging onto the land?
If the story about they breaching the first layer of private security, breaching the second layer of police, and then, as it were, confronting the military is anything to go by. And remember that early in 2016, this abandoned sites is the same venue or area where the Anglo Gold lost their corporate affairs manager. He was killed in one such confrontation with the illegal miners. So they would have prepared and ensured that their security there is tight.
Yes, so the first layer, if it is true that there was a first layer, among the first layer of resistance, how many people died from Anglo Gold? The second layer of resistance, the police, how many people died?
Okay.
How come that it was only the third layer that resulted in deaths? So there are questions. That's why I support His Excellency John Maham's directive for the matter to be investigated.
Okay.
It's a standard, a universal standard.
Right.
That when people bearing arms, when they use the arms, whether legally or illegally, we need to understand the circumstances that led to the use of
the media's role in projecting the vitriol and suggesting that the people have been deprived of their resources. The locals have been deprived of their resources, and therefore they can go there and make, a living. How do we treat that also in the midst of what does the media regulators do? The NMC, the National Media Commission, what has he been doing? Has the Media Commission been aware of these inflammatory comments that are capable of inspiring this kind of situation over the period? George Sapong is the Executive Secretary of the National Media Commission. Thanks for joining us, sir. We just lost George Sapong. He should join us shortly. When he does, we'll bring him on.
But even before George comes in, if you hear media saying that the property is yours, go attack the property. Just like saying, go attack the offices, because this is public property. Public property. Now, when the attack on public property is ended, where do you think they go? So is the media saying that when matters come to worse and push comes to shove, they will justify armed robbery?
Okay.
Because mining or gold without permit, it's like stealing. It's akin to stealing.
Thank you. Mr. Josaphan, we're asking what you have been doing because you are responsible for regulating.
Thank you very much, Samson. And let me acknowledge the brilliance of the panelists and the commitment they brought to those discussions. I particularly heard the passionate comments of Senior Pan Davis on the issue of media responsibility in the issue. I have two quick comments. Number one is directly on your question of what has the NMC been doing. With respect to the particular presenter in issue, we have issued a number of warnings to the station. First, this is the same presenter who said that the Western Regional Minister, he spoke chief. He made statements implying that the Western Regional Minister is stupid, like a northern politician. We cautioned him, cautioned the station. The management said they saw nothing wrong with what he was doing. It is the same presenter who wished that Nana Otuo Srebo would be killed, chairman of the Council of State. We cautioned management of the station once again. He said they saw nothing wrong with what he was doing. It is the same presenter who called the Chief of Defense Staff and the generals of the Ghana Armed Forces beast. He's the same presenter who insulted the chiefs and people of Turkey to the point that they had to perform rituals to declare him persona non grata. The management of the station said they see nothing wrong with all these issues. So we stepped the matter up to the board and said, if management is thinking at the level of the presenter, they would be unable to deal with this problem. We believe that the board will bring something higher to this. And we really want to encourage all of you to look at the kinds of people on the board. Samson, the board wrote back to say that they also endorse the behavior of the presenter and they see nothing wrong with it. This is at the point at which we filed a notice of revocation against the station with the National Communications Authority. So with respect to this particular presenter, this is the chronology of events. I want to make a quick comment on his defense that he made the comment about a year ago. That is a pitiful display of ignorance. So this is a presenter who doesn't even have the most basic understanding of media effects and how it operates. He does not understand how media content operates on the public mind. But once we talk about this presenter, we also need to have the same courage that Senator Frank Davis, yourself, and the others display in saying that he is only a villain puppet. The problem is with the mind that...
Oh, we lost Josh Sapong again. When we get Josh Sapong, he was wrapping up, so we get him and get that done, and then we'll move on. Bashiratu, what do you say? You are involved in labor matters. You are involved with grassroots and dealing with people. What do you think, from what you have heard so far and seen, has happened in Obuasi, and how do we go about resolving it?
Oh, my Samson. First, let me say that...
Bashiratu, hold on. Let's finish with George Sapong. George Sapong was wrapping up. Hello, yes. Mr. Sapong.
So, Samson, the point I was seeking to make is that we need to see what this presenter is doing within its context. He is only a puppet player. Those who are holding the strings controlling him also need to be brought to order. As far as the National Media Commission is concerned, this was the idea behind LIT for the Content Standards Electronic Communication. And we strongly believe that all of us need to represent. I heard you raise the question of jurisdiction, and I knew that you were seeking to educate the public. Let all those who sit outside and send in wrongful content understand that you do not avoid liability by standing at Aflao and throwing bomb into Togo and claiming that there are no jurisdictional matters in there. It is the same thing that applies to media content. Where you sit to do the act may not matter. The society that you impact may well be where you be held liable.
Yeah, but the thing is that they take safety in the fact that they are not in your country. You can't get them. That's what I mean. For those who are operating virtually.
And you are right. But I think we need to deal with three things and help them to understand that they will not avoid liability for long. The enforcement challenges are completely different from the questions of liability, and they need to learn them.
Okay. John Sapon, thank you very much for your time.
God bless you. Bro.
Right. Bashiratu, let's hear you. Hello, Bashiratu.
Yes, Samson, thank you. I want to start with a comment that nothing can justify what has happened in Obuasi, either on the part of citizens and on the part of the police. Now, there's an issue of whether Anglo Gold has a right to be there, and the discussion around, even if I have a right to eat and I have a right to survive, who is responsible?
Oh, what just happened to her line? But Bashiratu, we have a difficulty with your internet. It looks like it's frozen, but you are beginning to make an important point. But Honorable Minister, do you know if there is any question as to whether Anglo Gold, any question as to their right to be on those properties?
Yeah, that's their property. They've occupied the property since they bought it from the. So when the property was transferred to them, and so that's their property, and everybody knows that that's their property. What is fueling the Galamsey activities is the price of gold. Okay, that people are seeing that you can easily make money by going to dig up the ground, collect some samples, grind them, use mercury to extract the gold, and go and sell. And people are very callous, even in their handling of mercury. I mean, when I visited there, I saw a small boy put the mercury bottle in the mouth, trying to open it by the teeth. You know, very, very, I mean, you can imagine that this is what is happening. And you see, the moral hazards. We are not even looking at the moral hazards. Look, these people are despoiling the environment, and then we are going to use resources that we have used in developing other areas to go and clean up their mess.
But you know, there's the bigger question that people like Oliver will ask you guys. You are the government, and you are the one who has given the concessions out. Meanwhile, these communities are the poorest of the poor, and they are visited by all sorts of disease. What is happening? So that's why sometimes they get up and they listen to voices like we have been, condemning, to do what they are doing. Frank Davis, do you sense the frustration in the voice of Mr. George Sapong to your concern, because they have issued caution upon caution and nothing seems to happen?
You see, Samson, I surely can see his clear frustrations. You see, but I don't think it should end there. You see, what is the difficulty being encountered in having this media station or broadcast shut down? What is the challenge? Because if the board of that media outlet, I don't know what the constitution of the board is, which people are on that board, but if a board of such a media outlet can justify, rightfully so to speak, that the comments, utterances, and the kind of irresponsibility exhibited by these journalists can stand the test of time, then I don't know what is happening in Ghana. I don't know what the Ghana Institute of Journalism itself is doing.
Should we do something about the law that NMC works with so that it can empower them to do beyond this persuasive approach that they do?
Samson, exactly. That is the only way, Samson, we can streamline the content of journalism in this country. Because, Samson, I must say, with greater respect to you, you are also a trained journalist and a trained lawyer to boot. I must say, we do difference. And humility. The kind of journalism being turned around these days, that people say anything and everything in the name of journalistic content. I think it's so appalling. And sometimes when you listen to them, your jaw just breaks because some of us, in the limited constraints of our age, came to meet journalists par excellence in this country. Journalists who just can't come on radio to talk. They investigate, they analyze, they critique, and you listen to them with joy. Okay. Samson, I am not humoring you, but you for one. How dare you, Samson, come and sit on radio and say something which is irresponsible? I mean, how dare you? Can you even justify this to your wife or to your children? You see, that is the focus we should all have. Sitting down here and talking on your media outlet. The whole of this international, Ghana and the international community is listening to me. Something I owe it to myself and to posterity that any time I come to the radio station, the television outlet, or on any show, I try as much as possible to represent what is the truth and what is factual.
All right.
If I err, let me err on the side of caution.
Thank you,
let
Frank.
me err on the side of lack of knowledge.
Thank
but
you.
not let me err on irresponsible utterances.
Thank you, Frank Davis. Bashira, you have the last say on this matter. You were making your point, yes.
Thank you, Samson. So I was saying that nothing can justify what has happened, and we have to condemn it outrightly, devoid of affiliation or devoid of interest. If we do not behave in such manner, we are going to end up having a reoccurrence of this because people know that instead of putting the national interest ahead, we are always going to put our personal and selfish interest ahead. Now, a few points I want to make about the issue of Obuasi is that, one, we tend to forget about discussing the workers at Anglo Gold, that they also have a right to eat. They also have every right that these other citizens have and the community have. Anglo Gold did not just come to Ghana and start mining. They had a license. Who gave them the license? So as much as you want to blame Anglo Gold, we also have to put the blame on the doorstep of anyone who is also responsible, whether visibly or invisibly. If you attack Anglo Gold, remember you are not just putting your own life at risk, but you are putting a lot of people's life at risk as well. As we speak, schools have been closed. Definitely, if there is a market around that place, people may not be able to access that market. Secondly, you mentioned that the corporate affairs manager died past some time ago due to a similar clash. For how long are we going to look on for some of these things? For some of these things to go on. Secondly, the issue about Oliver mentioned about corporate social responsibility. We have consistently reminded companies and insisted that instead of just doing corporate social responsibility, we should look at it from a broader spectrum of what we call worker and community-driven corporate social responsibility. If you leave corporation, they will leave it to doing their PR thing, things that make them look good in the eyes of the public, rather than things that actually respond to direct needs of citizens. The third thing I want to say is that what are the role of our traditional leaders? In December, I was on my way to the field in Sunyane, and there is this new mining company that is coming up somewhere on the road. When I was asking questions, I was told that the mining company went with the chief to talk about development and other things. And some of them actually requested for, is it B8 and houses and all of that. Remember, when it explodes, these guys always have a way to protect themselves and what is very dear to them and leave the rest of the people there. So as we are speaking about the role of government officials and of everybody, we should not forget the role our traditional authorities play. The last point I'll make is that, like you said, I work with the labor unions, AGREC specifically. As we speak, beyond cocoa farmers facing forced eviction because of the activities of Galamsey, Samson, you will not believe that multinational companies in the oil palm sector have faced issues with illegal miners, encroaching into oil palm plantation in some of the areas in the Western region. For how long can we wait to have these things consistently happen? When, one, we are talking about job creation, And people are going to end up losing their jobs because of these things. My work with the women in mining Ghana, we went to the field in some areas to work. The comment that was made about the child using mercury in a certain way, we did witness women finding in, for them, they don't use the water bodies, but they dredge their own wells to do the washing and processing in. They will stand in, no Wellington, but nothing. Secondly, you know, they keep mercury under their beds and some in their kitchen. They use their feet to actually cut through in the course of processing. I mean, the situation is very scary. And these activities do not only just affect the community and the individual, but we are going to have an issue where a lot of men are even going to suffer impotence because of the occupational safety and health implication related to some of these things that are being done. It is a high time we take the bull by the horn, devoid of political affiliation and of culture, and put the national interest at heart. If we do not deal with this situation, we might run into more serious issues as a country, and it will be difficult to deal with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Bashiratu. And as there was a reference to Asawase, I'm receiving messages from people in Asawase, and they are asking that, this one says that we, the families of Zongo 7 at Asawase, are planning a court action against the government over non-prosecution of the police officers, as announced by the president when he met us at the Georgia Hotel in 2019. And that is true, that is factual. There was a promise to prosecute the police officers who were caught lying, barefaced lie, that those people had arms, when the arms had been gathered from somewhere and displayed as those people who had, used them. I'm bringing Suleimana because he wants to say something quickly in a minute. But before he does that, and then we go to our constitutional matter and the committee set up by the president, listen to this bit of this video that I've been talking about. Those of you who have started your party political attacks, you know I'm used to this. I've done this for how many years? MPP had just lost power. Just watch. It won't be long. You see them. There are people who are accusing me. You see them very happy around me, around this table. So it was a factual issue I was talking about. Ahead of the elections or thereabouts, this happened. And it's a meeting of NDC people. And listen to part of what they said.
Me as a political organizer, I was going to be yeah, we will vote now. We will send a papa now. Now they catch the members of the protest on the camera. Yes, I'm
All right, so I'll not interpret. Those of you who understand Chi, good for you, enjoy it. This is a party organizer, women organizer constituency, and you hear her talk about how there's power that is coming, and when that power comes, it ought to be used to protect the galamseyers, and how they will seek to distribute, some sort of concessions for their benefit. Who tells them that galamsey is right, and that a party wins power must protect you to do it, and so on? Yes, Sule, 1 minute. What's your reaction?
Samson, thank you. I just wanted to touch on the media issue and how dangerous some of these things can be.
Mm-hmm.
And reference to the actions of Captain Smart on Onua TV, Onua FM. I think George has mentioned some of the actions that were taken, but I just wanted to also say that the actions of the NMC in this case, actually, the NMC went far. You know, I've always been somebody who criticizes the NMC for inaction, but in this case, we request that you take down the frequency of this particular station, and then at that point, the management of the station then decided to go to court to seek injunction against any action. And the NMC wrote to the Advertisers Association about its intention to get NCA to take down the frequency. Again, at this point, the Ghana Independent Association took issue with the actions of the NMC and criticized the NMC for not allowing the media organization to have, a fair hearing or whatever they were referring to. But the point is, if the NMC had repeatedly written to the management of the station, and the station is saying, well, we are okay with what the person is doing, what fair hearing was Giver talking about? And I think that it is important. You remember the Mutie trade. The Supreme Court then said, look, the managers and the board of the organization should also be held responsible and required of them to present policies and documents of the station. This station, as George was talking about, we have reputable people on the board. In fact, the board is chaired by no less a person than Mr. Kojo Yanka. And Mr. Kojo Yanka is somebody that we all revere. We've all learned under him before. He's been an editor. He's been the director of Ghana Journalists Association. He's been a minister before. He has a journalism school and so on. The question is this the kind of journalism that we want, people to come up and do? And so I think it is time that we really hold the management and the board of this particular station responsible before we all get ourselves into trouble with the actions of stations like Onua and Onua TV and Onua FM.
How do you do that when NMC doesn't have the power to bite?
Well, of course, reviewing and reforming the laws around the NMC to give them power to act is important. But whilst we are at that, I think that we need to also hold the leadership responsible. When you invite journalists to train them, they tell you, look, some of these things we know, it is not this, it's not that. But our managers will not allow us to do what we think is professional.
Right.
And they want us to do what will bring the numbers. And in this case, I think it is just the numbers that the board and the management of Onua FM, Onua TV have been looking at. And I'm quite, that this organization is chaired by no less a person than Mr. Kojo Yanka.
Thank you very much, Suleiman Ibrahima. And thank you also, Media Foundation for West Africa, for what you continue to do. And just recently, before the elections, you had just done one other trainings like that on how to avoid defamation and the rest to a good number of journalists. And I was there helping them as well. Thank you for what you do. Musa Abattoir in Asawase says, Samson, while condemning the invasion of state institutions during government transitions, we must also demand justice for the tragic loss of innocent lives in Obuasi. The military's unprofessional use of lethal force against unarmed civilians is unacceptable. Accountability is crucial to prevent future incidents and protect civilians' safety and rights. Right, so let's wait for the committee and hear what their findings will be. We will be right back to see what exactly is the Professor H. Kwesi Prempeh committee, Constitution Review Committee. What exactly are they going to do that will be different from the Professor Mills, Professor Fiajo, Albert Fiajo committee's work, the CRC's work, which gave us 1,000 pages of the biggest socio-political data that we have ever gathered in this country. A white paper was issued and he cherry-picked and decided which ones we should implement and which ones we should not. And then Parliament, so say Chairman Sabonso and his team said, you will not implement it. Professor Kweku Asare went to the Supreme Court and then it stopped the process of implementation. By the time the Supreme Court gave the go-ahead for implementation, it was too late for the Mahama administration to do so. Then Chairman Sabonso comes into government, he also sets up a constitution review consultative committee that also looked at that report as well and brought out some things to do. Now, this committee is supposed to look at these two products of these two, the reports of these two committees, and bring actionable recommendations. Is it the issue of the reports, or is the issue of lack of political will to reform our constitution? We'll be right back.
It's compelling if you are thinking in terms of taking into account the fact that we have a younger generation. Those of us, people in my generation, who had experienced life under authoritarian military regimes and the like, may have a different attitude to the democratic system we have today. That may not apply necessarily to the younger ones.
A new constitution offers us an opportunity to do more than revise. It allows us to redefine. It is a chance to articulate a vision for the future that is rooted in the experiences and aspirations of today's Ghanaian. It provides a platform for an inclusive dialogue with the kind of society we want to build and the values that should underpin it. Question is, if you take the entire constitution and the things Oliver mentioned there, the recommendation is 478. So the recommendations alone are even more than the entire articles of the Constitution, which tells you that there's a fundamental conceptual problem.
We will need to almost run a campaign, like a political campaign, to tell Ghanaians that this conversation we're having is connected to bread and butter, because it is. But it's difficult to tell someone that a constitutional amendment process is connected to economic development. That's the big question that we all will have to answer. If we fail in answering that question, we will not be able to convince Ghanaians that there is any need for constitutional amendment.
But that is one of the biggest problems that we have. Is it that at the time they were thinking a woman cannot ascend that into a position that high, such that we have to limit all the provisions in the Constitution. So with the section on the part that talks about women's rights, all other provisions talks about he.
So when you begin to think about it in that way, then the question as to whether we should be putting everything on the Constitution, I have my doubts, because I take the new finance minister who is entering office right now. If he goes and completely mismanages the economy, what's going to happen to him?
Right. And what you've just been watching is a recording by Paula Mortuary of Good Evening Ghana at the Democracy Hub, conversation that was held at the British Council in the course of the week. It's a program organized by the Democracy Hub, and they insist that rather than tinkering with the Constitution bit by bit, we should simply overhaul it, a complete new constitution. They call it New Constitution for a New Generation. It's a better way to do it. So let's begin the conversation from there, because the man who delivered the keynote address at that function is here, Oliver Barker-Vormawor. So what's the point? That what President Mahama has inaugurated, seeking to do, will not achieve the results we need?
I want to commend the committee that's been put up by the president. In particular, a number of individuals there, and Professor Kwesi Prempeh, whose progressive leanings nobody can doubt, and his views on constitutional reform in this country. I think that one of the things that we sought to do, and we call it the case for a new constitution at the event, was to push people's imagination beyond some of some of what we've seen within the conversations that has happened. Now, we admit willingly and immediately that the constituency around a new constitution idea is perhaps the smallest constituency that exists in this debate. But we think that our governance can be improved by testing ideas and testing the limits of what ought to be done. And we said that in the context of, we give two main propositions why, for all the things that we're trying to achieve, a new constitution is perhaps the better framework and perhaps the simpler approach. In particular, we laid out our concerns about the process of how this will take place. And we talked about the process particularly in light of why it has not been possible to achieve constitutional reform over the years until this day. In particular, constitutional reform that reflects the aspirations of so many Ghanaians and key ideas. We think that a new process is still going to face those challenges. One, about how we do the amendments themselves. The highest number of amendments I think we've done to the Constitution is 10 at a time in 1996 when the Accra-Rawlings issue happened. But the range of amendments that have been suggested, if you take the Constitution Review Commission's report, there's over 229 provisions, I think, that affect the Constitution recommendations that they made. And then there were in total 473 that concerned, other administrative and legislative changes that have to happen broadly. The range of amendments that are being talked about are a lot. But beyond that as well, several of those provisions touch entrenched provisions, unentrenched provisions. And there are some suggestions, some have suggested that is almost undemocratic to bundle up so many constitutional amendment questions and suggest that to referendum and ask Ghanaians to vote yes or no. So that's a process question that needs to be dealt with. There's also the question about the role of Parliament in the process, whether or not Parliament can tinker and change things within the constitutional amendment bill. There are people outside of Parliament that hold a view that they can't, but Parliament itself holds the view that they can change things within it. It's unclear as to what effects the Council of State's views are to have on the amendment bill itself, whether the bill which is gazetted must be taken as it is wholesale without any changes to it. All those questions make the process more difficult and uncertain. Now, some of the key ideas driving the process now is about, for instance, like we talked about whether the president should continue to appoint ministers from within Parliament. Something that we know from history that Parliament is completely averse to. And even though there's a rising crescendo of voices who are calling for this, it must go through Parliament. And is Parliament going to look on for that to happen? That's the question we're going to see as the days unfold.
You suspect they will not agree?
I suspect that this is not going to happen. If they don't agree, then what is more likely to happen is that they're going to filibuster the process. So those are things that we need to avert our minds to. And we're saying that one of the ways in which you circumvent...
And filibuster means they will delay it.
They will delay it in perpetuity. Because unlike, for instance, the Article 106, which has clear timelines, well, after he leaves Parliament, this doesn't have that at Chapter 25. So he can stay for quite a long time in many ways. And then we have also talked about, so one of the ways in which you get around a lot of that process is to take all these recommendations, change the changes that you want to, and then present a holistic document to the people who have the sovereignty to make that decision. Now, I am not disputing that there are certain people who also hold the view that no, that is impossible with the current constitution we have. But we don't accept that as a democratic view anywhere in the world. If the Kenya, if taking Barbados, the people can come up at any time and propose for themselves a new constitution.
Professor Bochi holds that view.
Yes.
You cannot change...
That you cannot change it.
The constitution. Because of Article 3 that says that the constitution, if it's overthrown, whatever it is. But my suggestion to him is that in that provision, it says, it talks about violent overthrow of the constitution.
Absolutely.
It doesn't talk about the people themselves agreeing that we want a new constitution and they cannot have it.
Absolutely. He and I have debated that view before. I mean, we talked about it and I've hinted at the fact that the constitution's focus is violent or other unlawful means, which presumably means that non-violent and lawful means can enable this to happen. But that view continues to persist among some at least. Then we've talked about the content itself. That when you take the Constitution, Chapter 25 divides the Constitution, as you know, into unentrenched and unentrenched, and you make changes, you amend these ones. How do you incorporate a new provision, for instance? So if there's a new idea, fresh idea that exists within the body of the Constitution, are you going to tag it to some existing provision within the Constitution? There's no mechanism for introducing new ideas. That is the defect we are talking about. That it doesn't allow you to read what problem are we trying to solve. And if the extent of that problem requires new ideas, this Constitution closes the door to that. And we've talked about, so that's one of the things that we want everybody to think about. And I know that just suggesting new is, there's always the question, but we can always amend, We have said that the most pragmatic way for Ghanaians who are interested in constitution review amendment is not to be so attached to the date of the document, but what justice the document can enable us to do. In short words, without having to, I suppose, recanvass the positions that were made on that day. But yeah, I think that's the convention we're inviting in any respect.
And there are salient parts of the Constitution that attract your attention as the Democracy Hub.
Yes,
share those with us.
We set forth 16 grand ideas for constitutional remaking. Our first priority is what we call the Popular Initiative. And the Popular Initiative, we're looking at examples from other countries as well, where Ghanaians have the opportunity and chance to be involved in constitution reform and amendments going into the future. And what this means is that the Constitution can set a threshold and said, if you gather a signature of, say, 10% of eligible voters, or 1 million Ghanaians sign a petition, the question can be put to referendum, whether or not the Constitution should be amended in the way in which Ghanaians are calling for.
If you can take us through a list of that, instead of explaining your 16 grand ideas.
Okay. So that one. The second one we talked about was proportional representation, for instance, which changes the nature of parliament. The third idea we talked about was about the environment and our constitution's relationship to the environment and preparing us for some of the ecological challenges that are coming up and that we have to revise the framework for that. We talked about people's right to natural resources. We are demanding that all natural resources that are exploited, that there should be a 25% community participation in every lease that is granted as a way in which we ensure social justice. We talked about decentralization in terms of how we decentralize. We shouldn't only focus on we shouldn't only focus on political decentralization by voting for DCs who have no money to operate, but that 40% of resources should be committed to local development. All development is local, after all. Which number am I on? We talked also about
separation of powers,
the separation of powers,
executive encroachment.
So we talked about the judiciary and reforming the judiciary. That the conversation should not be narrowed down to whether or not we cap the Supreme Court, but there has to be broader reforms on how to make it much more independent. For instance, better empowering the Judicial Council and reforming the Judicial Council in particular.
Abolishing the Council of State.
The abolishment of the Council of State is one we have called for. We think if we can go ahead and forget them and make appointments clearly, nobody even remembers that they exist. We've talked about
president must pay tax.
The need for the president.
Almost everybody agrees with you
on that. The president must pay tax. We've talked about the need for the indemnity provisions of the Constitution should be removed. Our point is that the Constitution cannot preach justice and then entrench impunity. We've called also for the fact that the president cannot be prosecuted after 3 years from leaving office.
If you can end on what you mean by end of wage apartheid.
So we've talked about the wage apartheid. And the wage apartheid, as we understand this, is the Article 71 framework, which allows certain individuals of Ghanaians to be within a particular class where they have, irrespective of whether the country is performing badly economically or whatever the situation may be, they're able to enhance for themselves allowances from periodically. And persons who serve the civil service in the public sectors across the length and breadth of this country do not have the same wage protections. That everybody must be put on single spine. Okay. Everybody must be on the national social security system as well. This is what ensures justice.
I'm laughing before I get to Ines Hussaini. Everybody must be on social security.
Yes,
everybody must be on single spine. Will it work? Will the elite who will control this process allow for such a thing to be done?
Me?
Yes.
Oh yes, I think that basically I share in the views of Oliver, except that our experiences as a country do not seem to support the call for a new constitution. Our constitutions have been tied to events, and this one is coming out from a movement of the people, particularly the youth, looking at how to bring a constitution that reflects their aspirations and that meets their expectations. So that is the challenge. Because apart from the first constitution, there was the order in council.
Yeah.
When we became a republic, we needed a republican constitution. Okay? Then when we became independent, the 1960 constitution, and that was a republic, actually. We had the first republican constitution. When that republican constitution was overthrown, we went to a second republic. So there was no constitution. So we went to a second republic. Okay? And then a third republic. And now a fourth republic. But what is advocating is not a republican event. It's not, the cutting of a rupture. Okay? He's saying that it's coming from a collection of the views and aspirations of the people to reflect what they desire.
And nothing stops that.
And nothing stops that. It has happened elsewhere. Elsewhere, the parliament has been converted into a constituent assembly to do that. It has happened somewhere. But that's why he said it's a limited constitution, a small constituency that seems to be supporting that. Because you need to understand that parliament can do that. We can constitute parliament to do that. But whether that parliament, changing parliament into a constituent assembly to do that will meet their legitimate aspirations. Because they are looking at a broad-based writing of the constitution. But I agree. It goes to show that Ghanaians think and believe that having practiced this constitution for close to 32 years, we need to tweak certain things. The Democracy Hub says, no, don't tweak. It's easier to just rewrite a constitution than tweaking it. Okay? So if you rewrite the constitution, you pass it. And that's a new constitution. Okay, so it's easier than to look at so many appointments, amendments in the constitution.
You have 41, CRC at least, suggested 41 entrenched clauses that had to be amended. And the argument is that you can't take all of them, bunch them together and say vote yes or no.
You cannot do that.
You must do one by one. So the argument is that if you want to do this kind of amendment, it will take us 1 million years to finish amending the constitution, which will never happen. And then the non-entrenched clauses, you had identified how many? 56, 57 of them.
Yes. So Parliament can do that, unentrenched. Parliament can do that. And Parliament has done that before. He mentioned 10, which has also far been done. So that one can be done. And the Constitution says that Parliament can do that. Now, how is Parliament going to safeguard its own interests? Because they're going to do that. And that's the issue he's raising. If the bill is introduced into Parliament, will Parliament debate that bill? Because that bill will be coming with an advice from the Council of State to pass it. Will Parliament have the authority to change what the Council of State has approved? Now, there is a school of thought which says that Parliament can do that because that is a bill. Okay? And there's another school of thought which says that no, but that's what the people say should be changed. How can Parliament change the bill to reflect what they want? And so there are many, but the good thing is that we're engaged in the conversation. And now I'm part of those who think that there's a case for a constitutional reform or constitutional review or a new constitution. There's a case for that.
You have been very committed to that.
There's a case to that because now, you see, even look at our history. Constitution 1992 came into being because we're transiting from a military rule to a democratic rule. So about 70% of this our constitution derives from the 1979 constitution. Okay, so they needed a document. Then they added our experience of 1979 in Article 78.1. And that is creating a problem for us. That's creating a problem because everybody goes to Parliament and thinks that you should become a minister. And then the very institution of Parliament that is supposed to protect our rights and also hold government accountable is now in bed with government. So we are not having accountability. We're not having it. And we can only have accountability if institutions of accountability hold those who spend our monies accountable. But because we're not having it, we have a deep sense of entitlement, number one, and number two, we have impunity. So how do we rectify that? That's the unintended consequence of the 1992 Constitution. Number two, you have an electoral commissioner who is appointed solely by the sitting president without recourse to Parliament or to the Public Services Commission. Meanwhile, he's a public servant. And then he faces credibility problems. Okay? How do we rectify that? And then he's given his conditions of service or her conditions of service in the case of our current electoral commission tied to the Justice of the Court of Appeal. When does she retire? If she's a young person, okay, she goes up to 70. So young, you are staying the whole life as an electoral commissioner. Do we want that? Then you have the seeming conflict between Article 71 and Article 17. Article 17 says that there should not be discrimination. And Article 71 is discriminating among public officers on the basis that some people are more public, than others. So you see, so you have problems. And that's why we need to look at it. Then you have the asset declaration. Now, when you look at the Constitution, the list of persons who have been told to declare their assets appear to be woefully inadequate. Because many people come into public resources, and then the Constitution is silent on them.
Even that people have issues that, for example, President Mahama should ensure that his officers have declared their assets even before they go for the vetting or before he swears them in. The Constitution says you must declare your assets and liabilities before you assume office. Then we went ahead and passed the law that says you have a 6 months grace period to do that. Why?
So you have to look at it. And I'm sure President Mahama is listening.
Because the Chairman's Committee recommends a 3 months grace period rather than declare before you assume the office.
We should go for declare before you assume office. We should go for that. Because you see, you are looking to put corruption behind you. You're looking for evidence of impropriety that can be traced to the very day a person takes office. Okay? So if you give 3 months, what do you think the person will do within the 3 months? He knows he has a 3 months window. What do you we will spiral to the bottom. So no, and I like the fact that people have drawn President Mahama's attention to the fact that his officers, his appointees must declare their assets before they assume office. And he set out values. He says the values that will define his government are transparency and accountability.
Right.
And this, the declaration of assets, and the chairman of the committee says, no, we should not just declare and put them in envelopes.
Yeah, it should be verified by the Auditor General.
The example of the Senegalese, or is it Senegal or Sierra Leone, who said, look, this is, I have declared.
Publish it.
And publish it. So the one will publish. And then we should extend, because we don't want people hiding their assets in the names of their wives and children. Not so, a public say. And then we know. And then we want the Auditor General to verify.
That's right.
That's a new amendment, to verify the declaration. Because we don't want people to declare in anticipation of acquisition.
What's your view of this particular committee? And they have just 5 months to present their report. Professor H. Kwesi Prempeh is the chair. Justice Sophia Dinyira is a member. Professor Kwame Karikari is a member. Mrs. Charlotte Osei is a member. Dr. Godwin Jokoto is a member. He teaches law at the University of Ghana. Ibrahim Tanko Amidu is a member. He's with Star Ghana. Dr. Isi Ansan is a member. She teaches as a Shesi. I think she's still there. Dr. Reina Akumpergia is a secretary.
Yes. I think that there's diversity. I think that there's inclusiveness. And I think that is based on good faith. We have got 2 reports already existing, the Constitution Review Committee and the Constitution Review Consultative Committee. The President draws their attention to the existence of those documents and tells them to look at them, look at the gaps, and see what could be done about the gaps, and then come up with actionable steps to see how the Constitution, our 1992 Constitution, have been amended. Can be amended. I'm sure the Democracy Hub will engage them and argue whether we need a new constitution or, we must look at certain provisions. But I think that like Kwesi Prempeh said, this is a good faith committee. And it's good also that the president, clearly we can see an intention to amend, that he's named the constitution so early in the day. Let's give them timelines.
Many have said this is his opportunity of a legacy. The legacy he's seeking, this is an opportunity because he also has to test in Parliament.
And that's not lost on him. That's why he's quickly, even before swearing in his minister, the Attorney General, establishes a committee for that.
Right.
Okay? And then he knows that he has, if it is the amendments in Parliament, he has the numbers to do that. Okay? But he doesn't want it to look like he's fostering his views on the people. So he's gone for people who have challenged his view and his leadership style in the past to see whether we can have buy-in, inclusiveness, okay, and engender legitimacy by what he'll be doing.
Right. And as I mentioned some time ago to you, you would realize that Professor H. Kwesi Prempeh has actually been at this for a long time.
Yes.
The Constitution Review Commission's work, when Gloria Akufo, the Attorney General, set up a committee to try and see how they could piecemeal implement some of the things, Professor H. Kwesi Prempeh had a role to play there.
He was the person who came up with the, with the
elections of the
not the DCE. The DCE was a good one, but he said, look, lumping everything together with one bill on the interim provisions to overreach the rights of the citizens, declare their stance on specific provisions.
That's right.
So I know, and he was a constitutional advisor to the former president. I know that.
Okay, and so people are excited about the character of the committee and the diverse nature of the committee. You don't have just throwing in some NDC people there to go and do work because you want to do this, but go to civil society, and people are really excited about this committee. Professor H. Kwesi Prempeh himself has issued a statement and says that he is excited about this committee, but this is a burden. It's a lot of sacrifice that they have to make, and they are supposed to make this within 5 months. How is that going to be possible, really?
You've established a platform. I don't know whether you're on that platform.
Yes, I'm on. Oliver is also on. Professor Jampo.
There's a tremendous debate on the platform.
Professor Jampo, Professor former Speaker of Parliament. Yeah, all of them, a good number of them. Let's hope that good work will be done. Let me go to Sule. Sule, what do you see in this attempt to revise the Constitution? People have said it's only a question of political will. It's not really about that we don't know that certain things have to be tweaked in the Constitution.
Samson, I think that, first of all, as Honorable Fuseni has said, the decision to have this committee very early on in the president's tenure is, for me, an indication of how serious he takes this. Many have also said that the real challenge with our development as a nation is the governance side of things, and not just the issue of elections, and then we have elected peacefully, and then we keep on going. The caliber of persons selected certainly, I think, is a reflection of how well intended the whole process is being thought about. As Professor Prempeh said, he is not known to be somebody who is an NDC member. We all know his views when it comes to the previous administration of John Mahama. And to have him as chair of the committee is a clear indication of an appreciation of his values and principles rather than his political affiliation. And for me, that is really great. And of course, all the other people that you mentioned, including my former best boss and mentor, Professor Kwame Kakari, Tanko, Isi Ansa, Justice Adinyera. I think all these people are people that we can say are patriots, nationalists, and people who have committed themselves to serving the country. Now, when it comes to the process, I think what has been put forward so far is the question of whether we adopt the gradualist approach by doing the amendments as we go, or we do the overhauling, which is, look, let's abandon this and go for a new one, even if it would mean we are repeating some of the things that are in this one that we find to be good, let us have a new constitution rather than the amendments. I tend to side with those who advocate for the gradualist approach in terms of identifying the provisions that we think are problematic and dealing with them, even if it's one at a time. And here I seem to side with President Akufo-Addo, who at one point during engagement with him at the Jubilee House on the issue of constitutional amendment said, look, we need to be very, very careful because this is the constitution that has carried us on for 3 decades. We've had previous constitutions, and then military people will step in and all of that. So if it is not completely broken, why do you want to, fix it as if it is completely broken? And so the gradualist approach for me grants us the benefit of caution, the benefit of, not rushing ourselves into something else. And then after a year or two of implementing that new constitution, we say, oh, amendments are needed and all of that. We can never have a perfect document, I believe. And no country would say it has a perfect constitution. And so I think perfecting it on a gradual basis for me is quite critical.
Sule, the gradualist approach. For example, the CRC brought up 41 entrenched provisions that needed to be amended. If you have to go to a referendum, you probably can only take one provision to that referendum, maybe one provision. So, and if you have to do tie the referendum with an election, that would mean how many years before you would have amended maybe 10 provisions that are entrenched. And the portions that are vexed, requiring some violent amendments, are all entrenched. The provisions on the presidency, the provisions on the judiciary, the provisions on all of them entrenched. And you know the entrenched provision, how the amendment process has to be gone into. It is a long process. The referendum must have at least 40% of the persons who are entitled to vote voting at the referendum, and at least 75% of the persons who voted voting in favor of a particular question. That's not easy to get. 75%.
Yes, not at all, Samson. And of course, as I said, I'm for the gradualist approach, despite the points you've raised. The fact that we are still at it, despite the 2011 process, the chairman's process, and now a new one being set up, means that it is, simply not an easy thing to do. And also the fact that even at the end of it, even if the experts and all have settled on certain provisions that require amendment, and those that are entrenched requiring that we put it to vote and let the masses determine, means that it is not something that we can simply say, oh, we think this is bad, and therefore let's go with it. The people have to speak about it. The people have to make their voices heard about it and their opinions known about it.
Okay.
And let's not also act as if, look, the thing is completely broken. We are in a crisis. We are in a mess. We've been at this for the last 31, 32, 33 years.
And what has the result been? You have been complaining and lamenting about the results.
Samson, it is true. And I don't think that if we were to amend or even overhaul the Constitution and have a new Constitution today, and we all agree this is the best form of Constitution, that is automatically going to transform our country into, whatever we all want it to be.
Okay.
I think it comes down to, yes, the Constitution matters, the laws matter, but we, the human beings, and how we operationalize them also matter a lot. And that, for me, is quite critical.
All right. Thank you very much. Bashiratu, what do you have to say? And you sat in the Democracy Hub process as well, and you shared your views. But briefly, tell us, are you inspired by this particular committee led by Professor H. Kwesi Prempeh, and what are your expectations? Hello, Bashiratu. Okay. Hello, Bashiratu. If you can unmute your mic and proceed. Okay, let me go to Frank Davis. Hello, Frank.
Yes, Samson.
Right.
Thank you.
Right.
Well,
Yes, I've listened
thank
to
you,
that.
Samson.
Okay, let's hear
Can
Frank.
you hear me?
Let's hear Frank. Frank, go ahead.
Yes, I've listened to the commentaries, and I think I want to place myself within the blend. Yes, let me start off with Oliver. I mean, Oliver, I can well imagine the zeal and the focus of this new constitution altogether. But Oliver, well, we cannot just overthrow the constitution unless we are in a military coup d'etat. So we just have to maybe we take it easy on that, because Oliver, I'm happy you have said that you are your numbers are negligible. So I'll say you are a significant minority, but not an insignificant one. So
micro minority.
Much as we want to tinker with the constitution, I think we will have to do it. To borrow the last speakers, we're in the gradualist approach. But let's see what it holds for us. You know, we've had a constitution review commission in 2010. We've had a constitution review consultative committee in 2023, and now we have a constitution review committee in 2025.
To look at the two works.
Yes. All these committees and the present one are being chaired by eminent Ghanaian citizens. I mean, we'll have to give them their due. Professor H. Kwesi Prempeh has showed his mettle over the years. I mean, he, excuse my language, doesn't suffer fools gladly. He says this as it is. So, what is it that the 2010 commission and the 2023 committee have done that we can piece together in all sincerity and make sure that we are able to evolve the Constitution 1992? You see, because it is not by word of say so. Our actions should envelope our deeds. The political will to carry out this exercise should be paramount. And in all sincerity, we should demonstrate our bona fides. If we are saying that it is being set up in good faith, let us demonstrate our bona fides and make sure that whatever recommendations are there, if we are able to tweak and come out with something just which is enviable to the generality of the public, fine. You see, because we all cannot run away from the inherent contradictions of the Constitution. I mean, just like Inusa said, how do you juxtapose Article 17 against Article 71? I mean, are you saying some public servants are more public servants than others? No. So if there is a criteria, I think that criteria should be holistic. But you don't set up one set of public officers or public servants, one rule for the other and another. So there are so many other parts of the Constitution that we all disagree with. But my focus should be on what the president intends to do with this committee and what he believes can be done with the recommendations that they will put forward. They have 5 months to complete this work. And I must dare say that some of the persons mentioned on that committee are people of steel. These are people who said, as it is, I've had the enviable record of practicing in the Supreme Court. And I mean, Justice Sophia Adingra, you cannot go to the Supreme Court and pretend as if you are going to play before her. I mean, this was a statue on the bench. At any time lawyers went to the Supreme Court and they saw her on the bench of the Supreme Court, they knew there was trouble.
Blunt speaking.
So if we have, if we have such, of course, Samson, you can bear me out, Inusa, the same. If we have such persons, Professor Kwame Karikari, I mean, these are people who have spoken their minds all over the years. I mean, we know what they have stood for and we know what they still stand for. All right? So I want to believe in the strength of character of these persons. Dr. Godwin Jokoto, I mean, fairly senior lawyer at the bar, and he, I mean, if you interact with him, it's his deep sense of reasoning and the way he articulates issues. And these are people who should be able to bring their experience to bear. But at the end of the day, what is it that we as a nation are looking for? See, we have to be bold enough to say that this in the Constitution we don't want, and this in the Constitution we will abide with.
Okay.
So I think the sincerity aspect is what should enable these persons to do their work to the best of their professional ability and be able to advise the president constructively, so that altogether we can have a document which ascribes to our aspirations and wishes here.
Right. Let me hear Bashira too. And there are people who point to AC Ansan, Dr. AC Ansan, and say she was the one who was bearing the placard that said the president is naked when during Occupy Flagstaff House, when they were we were demonstrating against the Mahama administration. There are some people who are not too excited. Why do you appoint, quote unquote, people who don't like you?
Well, I think what we should also be interrogating is whether AC Ansa doesn't like President Mahama or it is about the state of the economy and from the perspective that she was coming from.
Right.
Because even looking at how we are all discussing these issues, we are all looking at things from a different lens of view. So the fact that, I mean, myself and Oliver have demonstrated a lot as part of Fit the Country, I've been part of Broader Chamber and all of that. Does that mean when my expertise are needed, I should be considered based on my activism? Or it should purely be about national interest where my expertise is what is needed and not about my activism and how I have fiercely, spoken out about certain things. And whatever applies to AC Ansa applies to every member of the committee, like Prof. I mean, we've all seen how Prof has been really critical on social media about his comments and other things.
Like so some say like father, like daughter.
Of course, I mean, and that's a normal thing to see around, So Dr. AC Ansa's membership, what is supposed to even tell us our earlier discussion about the type of appointment President Mahama has made, whether it is about affiliation, it is about national interest, it is about competence. And that is the lens I think we should all be using to look out for in all of the appointments and what our expectations are. Otherwise, if we limit it to political party affiliation and other things, we may, I'm just using may loosely, not get what we really seek to get. And let's not also forget, Samson, that this is President Mahama's second coming. He's been there before. He has seen what we all have probably not seen. He possibly also wants to avoid certain things and leave a legacy before exiting, finally. So we should trust the process. What Ghanaians should do now is to commit to supporting in whatever way we can to make this process work. And if we truly believe in what we have all been clamoring for, which is an inclusive government instead of the winner takes all, this is what we should be doing and looking out. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you also very much, our guests and our viewers as well. This has been Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news analysis platform. And when we say that, I know you understand that's exactly what we mean. Inusa Fuseni, former MP, Tamale Central, former ranking member, Constitutional, Legal and Parliamentary Affairs Committee of Parliament. Oliver Bakavomawo, Constitutional Rights and Policy Strategy Advisor, Democracy Hub. Frank Davis is Chairman, Constitutional and Legal Committee, New Patriotic Party. Suleiman Ibrahima is Executive Director, Media Foundation for West Africa. Bashira Kamal is Fellow, Center for Social Justice. We were also joined by George Sapong. The expertise that he carries is huge. He is the head of the Executive Secretary of the National Media Commission. Newsfile, as always, is brought to you by Bank of Africa, strong as a group and close as a partner. Close as a partner, MTN everywhere you go. And very many Ashesi University educating ethical and entrepreneurial leaders for Africa. And then we also have Robert and Sons Optical Services. They have been doing this for over 31 years consistently. Also, DBS Industries, roofing, Papa,